Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Marcus Colson, but everyone calls me Mark. I've been a forest ranger for 16 years now, and before that I spent 8 years down in the coal mines, just like my daddy and his daddy before him. 3 generations of Colsons, pulling black gold out of these Kentucky mountains. I'm 41 years old, and my lungs already sound like an old truck trying to start on a cold morning. That's what happens when you breathe coal dust for most of your 20s. The doctor says I got maybe 10 good years left before I'll need one of those oxygen tanks, but I try not to think about that too much. These days, I work for the Daniel Boone National Forest, checking on old mine sites and making sure hikers don't fall down any forgotten shafts. It's quiet work mostly. I like it that way. After years of dynamite blasts and machinery noise underground, I appreciate the sound of wind through pine trees. But last Tuesday, that quiet got broken real fast. I was sitting in my truck, eating lunch and filling out paperwork, when Jerry Patterson came running up the trail like his pants were on fire. Jerry's a local caver, one of those guys who loves crawling through tight spaces underground for fun. Usually he's calm as a lake in summer. "Mark!" he yelled, leaning against my truck to catch his breath. "You gotta come look at this. Something's wrong with the old Hendricks mine." The Hendricks mine. I knew that place well. It was dug back in the 1890s, went deep into Colson Ridge. Yeah, same name as my family. The mine had been sealed up tight for over 80 years, ever since the big fire in 1891 that killed 47 miners. Local folks still won't go near it after dark. "What kind of wrong?" I asked, closing my lunchbox. Jerry wiped sweat from his forehead. "Me and Billy went to check out some of the side caves near the old entrance. We wanted to see if any new passages had opened up after that big storm last month. And? There's something moving around in there, Mark. Something big. We saw eyes, red eyes, glowing like car headlights. And the smell." He made a face like he'd eaten something rotten. "Smells like eggs gone bad. Like sulfur." I'd heard stories like this before. Old mines do funny things to people's minds. The air gets thin. Carbon monoxide builds up, and suddenly you're seeing all kinds of things that aren't there. My own grandfather used to tell stories about mine spirits, said they were just the ghosts of dead miners, looking for a way out. "Jerry," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle, "you know what happens when people go poking around old mines? Bad air can make you see things." That's what I thought, too. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a camera. "But look at this." He showed me a picture on the little screen. It was dark and fuzzy, but I could make out the wooden supports of an old mine tunnel. And there, carved deep into the wood, were claw marks. Fresh claw marks. "Those beams are over 100 years old," Jerry said. "Wood's hard as stone by now. But these scratches are new, Mark. Real new." I stared at the photo. Those marks were deep, too deep for any animal I knew about. And they were in a pattern, like fingers dragging down the wood. "Show me," I said. 20 minutes later, we were standing at the old mine entrance. The state had welded steel bars across the opening back in the 50s, but time and weather had rusted them pretty good. Someone, or something, had bent 2 of the bars apart, creating a gap just big enough for a person to squeeze through. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it into the darkness. The beam barely reached 10 feet before the black swallowed it up. But I could see those claw marks Jerry had photographed, and more besides. They covered the wooden suppo. It's like scratch marks from a giant cat. "When did you first notice this?" I asked. "Yesterday morning. Billy and I were exploring the cave system about half a mile east of here. We heard sounds coming from this direction, like metal being twisted. By the time we got here, the bars were already bent." I knelt down and examined the ground near the entrance. The dirt was disturbed, like something heavy had been dragging across it. But the strange thing was the temperature. It was a cool October day, maybe 55 degrees, but the air coming out of that mine felt warm, almost hot. "You boys didn't go inside, did you?" Jerry shook his head fast. No, sir. Billy wanted to, but I told him we should get you first. Something about this whole thing feels wrong, Mark. Really wrong. I stood up and brushed dirt off my knees. My breathing was getting a little rough. It always did when I got nervous. I'll need to go down there and take a look, file a proper report. You want me to come with you? No. I was already thinking about the equipment I'd need. This is official business now. You boys stay away from here until I can figure out what's going on. Jerry nodded, but I could see he wasn't happy about it. Cavers are curious people by nature. Telling them to stay away from an interesting hole in the ground is like telling a dog not to chase a rabbit. As we walked back to the trucks, I kept thinking about those claw marks. I'd been in and out of dozens of old mines over the years. I knew what animal damage looked like. Bears, wildcats, even large dogs. They all left different kinds of marks. But these were different. They were too deep, too deliberate. And they were everywhere, like whatever made them had been very angry about something. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and pulled out every file I had on the Hendricks mine. The official records were pretty basic. Mine opened in 1889, good quality coal, employed about 60 men at its peak. Then came the fire in 1891. According to the report, it started deep in the mine, in a sect, and they called the Black Seam because the coal there was so pure it looked like polished obsidian. The fire spread fast through the tunnels, trapping 47 miners underground. By the time rescue teams could get to them, it was too late. But what caught my attention was a detail I'd never noticed before. The rescue team captain, a man named Samuel Wright, wrote in his report that the fire was still burning when they went down. Not just smoldering, actively burning, with flames hot enough to melt metal support beams. Coal fires aren't that unusual. Sometimes they can burn underground for years. But this fire had been burning for over 80 years now, and according to Wright's report, it was burning hotter than any coal fire he'd ever seen. I closed the file and rubbed my eyes. Tomorrow I'd have to go down into that mine and see what was really going on. Part of me, the part that had grown up hearing ghost stories about dead miners, was already dreading it. But the ranger part of me, the part that had a job to do, knew I didn't have a choice. Whatever was down there, I was going to find it. I spent Wednesday morning gathering equipment. If I was going into an old mine, I was going to do it right. I loaded my truck with a modern breathing mask, extra batteries for my lights, a gas detector for methane and carbon monoxide, rope, first aid kit, and my radio, though I doubted it would work once I got deep enough underground. The drive back to Hendricks Mine took about 30 minutes through winding mountain roads. When I arrived, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten up. The gap between the bent bars was wider than it had been yesterday, a lot wider. I parked the truck and walked over to examine the entrance. The steel bars were bent outward now, like something had pushed them from the inside. The metal was twisted in a way that would take incredible strength or incredible heat. I ran my fingers along one of the bars. It was warm to the touch, even though the morning air was cold enough to see my breath. "What the hell?" I muttered, pulling out my gas detector. The device immediately started beeping. Methane levels were high, but not dangerous yet. Carbon monoxide was barely registering, but the temperature reading made me stop and check the device twice. According to my detector, the air coming out of the mine was 97 degrees. That was impossible. The ground temperature in these mountains never got above 60 degrees, even in summer. And this was October. I strapped on my breathing mask and checked my equipment one more time. The mask would give me about 2 hours of clean air. Plenty of time to take a quick look around and get back to the surface. The entrance tunnel was about 7 feet high and wide enough for 2 men to walk side by side. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing wooden support beams that were black with age and moisture. But as I walked deeper, I noticed something strange. The wood wasn't rotting. After 80 years in a damp mine, those beams should have been falling apart. Instead, they looked almost preserved, like the heat was drying them out instead of letting them decay. 20 feet in, I found the first set of claw marks Jerry had photographed. Up close, they were even more disturbing. 4 parallel gouges, each about an inch deep, ran from eye level down to about 3 feet off the ground. Whatever made them had to be big. I took out my camera and snapped several pictures, then continued deeper into the mine. The main tunnel split into 3 directions, about 50 feet from the entrance. My grandfather's old stories came back to me. He'd worked this mine as a young man before the fire. He always said the middle tunnel led to the black seam where the best coal was. That's where the fire had started. I chose the middle path. The temperature kept rising as I went deeper. My gas detector was beeping steadily now, registering 98.9, then over 100 degrees. I was starting to sweat inside my breathing mask, which wasn't supposed to happen. Then I saw the first impossible thing. The tunnel ahead of me wasn't built by miners. Oh, it started out normal. Wooden supports, tool marks on the walls where men had chipped away at the rock. But about 100 feet in, the tunnel changed. The walls became smooth, almost like glass. They curved in a way that looked natural, like flowing water, but they were cut through solid rock. No mining equipment could do work like that. It would take incredibly high heat to melt rock in those kinds of patterns. I played my flashlight beam along the walls and found more claw marks, hundreds of them. They covered every surface, overlapping and crossing like some kind of angry message written in a language I couldn't read. That's when I heard the sound. It started low, like the rumble of distant thunder, but it was coming from deeper in the mine, and it was getting closer. I stood perfectly still, listening. The sound came again. Not thunder, breathing. Something huge was breathing in the darkness ahead of me. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. But I was a ranger, and this was my job. I had to know what was down here. I moved forward as quietly as I could, playing my light ahead of me. The tunnel curved to the right, and as I came around the bend, I saw something that made me forget how to breathe. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, maybe 30 feet across. The walls glowed with a dull red light like embers in a fireplace. And in the center of the chamber, sitting on what looked like a throne made of coal, was something that definitely wasn't human. It was about the size of a large man, but that's where the similarity ended. Its skin looked like charcoal, black and rough with cracks that glowed red like it was burning from the inside. Its arms were too long, ending in hands with fingers like railroad spikes. And its eyes were the color of melted steel, and they were looking right at me. I don't remember making the decision to run. 1 second I was staring at that thing, and the next I was sprinting back through the tunnel as fast as my legs could carry me. Behind me I heard a sound like a freight train starting up, a roar that made the tunnel shake and sent rocks falling from the ceiling. The temperature was rising fast now. My gas detector was screaming warnings about heat levels. The wooden support beams were starting to smoke. I made it to the 3-way split and dove down the left tunnel instead of going back the way I'd come. I could hear that thing moving behind me, and I could smell sulfur so strong it made my eyes water even through my breathing mask. The left tunnel was shorter than the middle one. It came out on the side of the mountain, about 50 feet above the main entrance. I burst out into daylight and kept running until I reached my truck. Only then did I stop and look back at the mine. Black smoke was pouring out of both entrances. As I watched, the steel bars across the main entrance glowed red, then white-hot, then melted completely. The wooden frame around the entrance caught fire and burned away in seconds. I grabbed my radio and called it in. "This is Ranger Colson requesting immediate fire department response at Hendricks Mine. We have a major underground fire. Repeat, major underground fire." But even as I made the call, I knew the fire department wouldn't be able to help with this. You can't put out something that burns rock. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my truck with Fire Chief Bobby Mullins, watching smoke pour out of the mountainside. "Mark," he said, "I've been fighting fires for 23 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The heat coming out of that mine is melting the rock around the entrance. Any idea what could cause it?" Bobby shook his head. "Coal fires can burn hot, but not this hot, and they sure don't start job for me again after being dormant for 80 years. He looked at me. "You were down there. What did you see?" I thought about the thing on the throne of coal, with its glowing eyes and railroad spike fingers. I thought about the tunnel that looked like it had been melted through solid rock. Gas buildup, I said. Must have ignited when I went in with my flashlight. It was a lie, but it was a lie that made sense. Bobby nodded and made a note on his clipboard. We'll have to keep people away from this whole area until the fire burns itself out, he said. I looked back at the mountain. The smoke was getting thicker, and I could swear I saw shapes moving around inside it. Shapes that walked on two legs. How long do you think that'll take? I asked. Bobby shrugged. Coal fires can burn for decades. Could be a long wait. As we drove away, I kept watching the smoke in my rearview mirror, and I kept thinking about those glowing eyes. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just going to stay buried anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing sitting on its coal throne, staring at me with eyes like molten metal. By morning, I'd made a decision that probably wasn't very smart. I was going back. But I wasn't going alone this time. Dr. Patricia Minefield was a geologist from the University of Kentucky who specialized in underground formations. I'd worked with her before on a couple of sinkhole investigations, and she was smart as a whip and tough as old leather. If anyone could help me figure out what was really happening at Hendricks Mine, it was Pat. I called her around 7 in the morning. Mark, what's wrong? You sound terrible. I need your help with something, Pat. Something strange. I told her about the mine, about the impossible temperatures and the melted rock tunnels. I didn't mention the thing I'd seen. Not yet. That conversatis needed to happen in person. Interesting, she said when I finished. Underground coal fires can produce some unusual geological effects. When did you say this started? Yesterday. But, Pat, this isn't just a coal fire. I think we're dealing with something more complicated. I can be there by noon. Email me the GPS coordinates. 3 hours later, Pat's Jeep pulled up next to my truck at the base of Colson Ridge. She climbed out wearing her usual field gear, khaki pants, work boots, and a hard hat with a headlamp attached. At 52, she was in better shape than most people half her age. Show me what you've got, she said. The mine entrance was still smoking, but the fire seemed to have died down overnight. The melted steel bars had cooled into twisted sculptures, and the wooden frame was just a pile of ash. Pat walked around the entrance, taking measurements and making notes in a small notebook. She had instruments I'd never seen before, things that beeped and clicked and showed numbers on digital displays. Temperatures still elevated, she said, checking one of her devices. But not as high as you described yesterday, maybe 90 degrees. Is that normal for a coal fire? Not particularly. Most coal fires burn at fairly low temperatures underground, maybe 400 or 500 degrees. Hot enough to be dangerous, but not hot enough to melt steel bars. She looked at the twisted metal. This would require temperatures over 2,000 degrees. So what could cause that? Pat was quiet for a minute, studying her instruments. There are a few possibilities. Gas explosion, maybe. Or if there's a particularly rich vein of coal down there, it could burn much hotter than normal. She looked up at me. You said you went inside yesterday. How far did you get? I told her about the tunnel system, about the melted rock walls, and the impossible architecture. I still didn't mention the creature. I want to see this for myself, she said. Pat, I don't think that's a good idea. Whatever's down there is dangerous. Mark, I've been studying underground formations for 25 years. I've been in coal mines, lava tubes, limestone caves, and some places that don't have names yet. Trust me, I can handle whatever's down there. An hour later, we were both suited up with breathing gear and safety equipment. Pat had enough instruments hanging off her belt to stock a small laboratory. I carried extra lights and emergency gear. The entrance tunnel was clear, though the walls were still warm to the touch. Our footsteps echoed in the darkness, and I found myself jumping at every small sound. Remarkable, Pat said when we reached the three-way split. She was examining the claw marks with a magnifying glass. These are definitely recent, but I've never seen anything like them. What kind of animal could make marks like that? That's just it. I don't think an animal did make them. Look at the spacing and depth. These were made by something with incredible strength and very specific anatomy. She looked up at me. "Mark, what aren't you telling me?" I took a deep breath. "Pat, yesterday, when I was down here, I saw something. Something that wasn't human." She raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I told her about the creature on the coal throne, about its burning skin and glowing eyes. As I talked, her expression changed from skeptical to interested to genuinely concerned. "You think you hallucinated it?" "I thought so at first. Bad air, stress, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning. But look around us, Pat. Look at these tunnels. Something melted through solid rock down here." Pat was quiet for a long moment, studying the walls with her instruments. "The geological evidence supports extremely high temperatures," she said finally. "Temperatures that shouldn't be possible in a natural coal fire." "So what are we dealing with?" "I don't know yet, but I think we need to see this chamber you found." We took the middle tunnel, moving slowly and checking our instruments constantly. The temperature rose steadily as we went deeper, and Pat's equipment was registering mineral compositions that didn't make sense. "Mark," she said, stopping to check one of her devices. "According to this, the rock composition changes about 50 feet ahead. It's showing traces of minerals that shouldn't exist at this depth." "What kind of minerals?" "Elements that only form under extreme pressure and heat. We're talking about conditions you'd find in the Earth's mantle, not in a shallow coal mine." We reached the curve in the tunnel, and I motioned for Pat to stop. "The chamber's just ahead," I whispered. "If that thing is still there. Let's find out." We crept around the curve and into the chamber. It was empty, but the throne of coal was still there. And now I could see that it wasn't just sitting on the chamber floor. It was growing out of it, like the coal had somehow formed itself into furniture. Pat moved into the chamber with her instruments out, taking readings and making notes. "This is impossible," she kept muttering. "These readings are impossible." "What's impossible about them?" "The coal formation here isn't natural. It's been shaped, molded, like someone worked it while it was soft. But coal doesn't get soft unless it's heated to over 1,000 degrees. She knelt down next to the throne and scraped off a small sample with a knife. "And this isn't regular coal. It's almost pure carbon, but with a crystalline structure I've never seen before." That's when we heard the footsteps. They were coming from deeper in the chamber, from a tunnel I hadn't noticed the day before. Slow, heavy steps that echoed off the walls like drum beats. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." But Pat was transfixed by her instruments. "Mark, look at this. The temperature just spiked to over 500 degrees. The footsteps were getting closer. I grabbed Pat's arm and pulled her toward the tunnel entrance. "We're leaving." She didn't argue this time. We ran through the tunnels as fast as our equipment would allow, while behind us the temperature kept rising and the walls started glowing red. We made it to the entrance just as the first explosion shook the mountain. The blast knocked us both to the ground and sent rocks flying out of the mine entrance. When the dust settled, I looked back and saw that the opening had partially collapsed. "Is everyone okay?" Pat asked, checking herself for injuries. "I think so, but we're not going back down there." Pat was looking at her instruments, and her face had gone pale. "Mark, according to my seismic equipment, that explosion came from at least 500 feet underground, and it wasn't caused by gas." "What do you mean?" "The pattern is all wrong for a gas explosion. This was structural, like something broke through a rock wall from the inside." As if to prove her point, another explosion shook the ground beneath our feet. This one was followed by a sound I remembered from the day before, that freight train roar. And then I saw them. 3 figures climbed out of the partially collapsed mine entrance. They looked like the creature I'd seen on the throne, but smaller, maybe the size of normal people. Their skin was the same charcoal black with glowing red cracks, and they moved in a way that wasn't quite human. "Pat," I said quietly, "don't move." She looked where I was pointing and froze. "What are they?" "I don't know, but they're looking for something." The creatures spread out, examining the ground around the mine entrance. One of them found our footprints and let out a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. The others gathered around, and they all turned to look in our direction. We were about 50 yards away, hidden behind some trees, but I had the feeling that distance wasn't going to matter much. "Run," I said. We ran. Behind us, I could hear the creatures giving chase. They moved fast, but not in straight lines. They seemed to flow from place to place like liquid shadow, and everywhere they stepped, the ground smoked. Pat's Jeep was closer than my truck. We dove inside and she gunned the engine as we tore down the mountain road. I looked back and saw all three creatures standing at the edge of the tree line watching us go. "What the hell were those things?" Pat gasped. I said. "They used to be miners." We drove straight to Pat's motel room in town, where she had more equipment and a laptop computer. While she analyzed the samples she'd collected, I made some phone calls. First, I called Fire Chief Bobby Mullins and told him to keep everyone away from Colson Ridge until further notice. Then I called my supervisor and requested emergency authority to evacuate the camping area near the mine. "Mark," my supervisor said, "you're talking about closing down a popular recreation area based on what, exactly?" "Geological instability. Underground fires have weakened the rock structure. It's not safe." It wasn't exactly a lie. The ground probably was unstable. I just wasn't mentioning why. While I was making calls, Pat was getting more and more excited about her test results. "Mark, you need to see this," she said, pointing at her laptop screen. "This coal sample isn't like anything in the geological record." "What do you mean?" "Regular coal forms over millions of years from compressed plant material. It's mostly carbon, but it has impurities, sulfur, ash, trace minerals. This sample is almost pure carbon, but it's arranged in a crystal lattice that shouldn't be possible." She pulled up another screen showing molecular diagrams. "And look at this. The sample is giving off heat, actual thermal energy. Coal doesn't do that unless it's burning, but this isn't combustion. It's like the carbon atoms themselves are generating energy." "So what does that mean?" "I think it means those creatures you saw aren't just living in the mine. They're part of it. The coal, the rock formations, even the tunnels. It's all one big organism." I sat down heavily in the motel room, a single chair. "An organism? Think about it. You said the tunnels looked melted, not carved. What if those creatures can somehow change the molecular structure of rock? Heat it up, reshape it, turn it into whatever they need? But how is that possible?" Pat was quiet for a minute, staring at her test results. "I've been thinking about the mine's history. 47 miners died in that fire in 1891. Their bodies were never recovered. The fire was too hot, and the tunnels were too dangerous." "Right. They're still down there somewhere." "What if they're not somewhere down there, Mark? What if they are down there? What if whatever process created those crystal formations also changed the miners themselves?" I thought about the creature on the coal throne, about its charcoal skin and glowing eyes. "You think those things used to be human?" "I think extreme heat and pressure, combined with high concentrations of carbon, might have created some kind of transformation. The miners didn't die in that fire. They became something else." Before I could respond, the lights in the motel room flickered. Then they went out completely. We sat in darkness for a moment, listening. Outside, I could hear car alarms going off, and in the distance, someone was shouting. "Power outage?" Pat asked. I looked out the window. The whole town was dark, but there was a red glow coming from the direction of Colson Ridge. "Pat," I said, "I think they're coming to town." We grabbed our equipment and ran outside. Main Street was chaos. People coming out of buildings, cars stopped in the middle of the road, everyone looking toward the mountains. The red glow was getting brighter, and as I watched, I could see shapes moving against the light. Lots of shapes. "How many miners died in that fire?" I asked. 47, Pat said. "Then we've got a problem." The creatures reached the edge of town, about 20 minutes later. They moved in a group, flowing down Main Street like burning oil. Everywhere they stepped, the asphalt melted. Parked cars burst into flames when they got too close. Most people had the good sense to run, but some folks just stood there, staring like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. I tried to get everyone moving. "This is Ranger Coulson," I shouted. "Everyone needs to evacuate the town immediately. Head south on Route 11. Some people listened. Others seemed frozen with fear. The creatures spread out, examining buildings, cars, anything human-made. They seemed confused by the modern world, like they were looking for something they remembered but couldn't quite find. That's when I figured it out. "Pat," I said, "they're looking for their families." "What?" "Think about it. These miners died over 100 years ago. Their wives, their children, they all lived here in town. The creatures are looking for people who've been dead for decades." One of the creatures approached an old woman who was too scared to run. It reached out with one of its spike-fingered hands and touched her face gently, almost tenderly. The woman screamed and collapsed, but I could see she wasn't hurt, just terrified. The creature made that steam-hissing sound again, but softer this time, sadder. "We have to help them," Pat said. "Help them what?" "They're dead, Pat. They've been dead for over a century." "No, Mark. I don't think they know that." She was right. The creatures were moving through town like they were searching for something specific. They'd approach people, examine them closely, then move on when they realized the person wasn't who they were looking for. But their presence was setting everything on fire. Buildings were starting to burn just from the heat they gave off. If we didn't do something soon, the whole town would be ash. "We need to get them back to the mine," I said. "How?" I thought about the creature on the coal throne, the one that seemed bigger and more aware than the others. "I think there's a leader. If we can get him to come out, maybe the others will follow." "That's a hell of a gamble, Mark. You got a better idea?" We loaded up Pat's Jeep with all the equipment we could carry and headed back toward Coulson Ridge. The road was empty. Everyone with any sense had evacuated south. The mine entrance was completely clear now. Whatever explosions had happened underground had blown away all the debris. The opening yawned like a mouth, with red light glowing deep inside. "Stay here," I told Pat. "Keep the engine running." "Where are you going?" "To talk to their king." I walked into the mine with nothing but a flashlight and a whole lot of hope that I wasn't about to get myself killed. The tunnels were different now. The walls pulsed with red light and the floor felt warm under my feet. It was like walking through the circulatory system of some enormous creature. I found the big one right where I'd seen him before, sitting on his coal throne in the chamber. But now I could see other details I'd missed in my panic the day before. Around the throne were scattered objects, tools, lunch pails, photographs, the belongings of dead miners, preserved in the coal like insects in amber. The creature looked at me with its glowing eyes, and I got the strangest feeling that it recognized me, that it knew I was a Coulson, that my family had worked these mines. "You're looking for your families," I said out loud, feeling foolish. "But they're gone. They died a long time ago." The creature made a sound like wind through broken glass. "Your friends are in town, and they're hurting people. You need to call them back." The creature stood up from its throne. Up close, I could see that its charcoal skin was etched with patterns, names, dates, faces. The entire history of the mine was written on its body. It reached out one spike-fingered hand and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I could see what it saw. The mine as it had been in 1891, full of living men working by lamplight. Families in town, children playing in the streets, women hanging laundry on clotheslines. And then the fire, the panic, the screaming, the terrible heat that changed everything. The creature showed me the moment of transformation, how the extreme heat and pressure had fused the miners' bodies with the coal itself, turning them into something that was part human, part mineral, part fire. They had been trapped underground for over a century, slowly going mad from isolation and grief. The recent cave-in had finally given them a way out. But the world they remembered was gone. I opened my eyes and found myself back in the chamber. The creature was watching me with an expression that might have been hope. "I understand," I said. "But you can't bring them back, and you can't keep hurting innocent people." The creature nodded slowly. Then it opened its mouth and let out a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, a call that echoed through every tunnel in the mine. 20 minutes later, I emerged from the mine to find all 47 creatures gathered outside. They looked at their leader, then at me, then slowly began walking back into the darkness. The last one to go was the leader himself. He paused at the entrance and looked back at me one more time. Then he raised one hand in what might have been a wave goodbye. The mine entrance collapsed a few seconds later, sealing itself with a sound like thunder. It took 3 days for the fires in town to burn out completely. The official report blamed an underground gas explosion that triggered a coal seam fire. The melted asphalt on Main Street was explained as the result of an unusually hot fire. Nobody talked about the creatures. Pat's geological samples disappeared into some university laboratory, and her preliminary report was classified by the state. She tried to publish her findings about the crystalline coal formations, but her paper was rejected by every scientific journal she submitted it to. Too extraordinary, they all said. Not enough peer review. 3 weeks later, Pat died in her sleep. Heart attack, the doctor said, but I found out later that her lungs were full of coal dust, even though she'd been wearing a breathing mask the whole time we were in the mine. I think the creatures marked her somehow. I think they knew she'd figured out their secret. As for me, my breathing got worse after that day. A lot worse. I had to retire early from the Ranger service. And these days I need an oxygen tank just to walk to the mailbox. But I'm still alive, and I think I know why. The creatures recognized me as family. A Coulson who'd worked the mines just like they had. My name is Theodore Stonecrow, but everyone just calls me Ted. I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 14 years now. My grandmother used to tell me stories about these mountains when I was little. Stories about the Nunehi, the Cherokee little people who lived in the rocks and trees. I always thought they were just tales to teach kids to respect the forest. I wish I still believed that. It was early October 1965 when everything started. The leaves were turning red and gold, and the morning air had that crisp bite that made you glad to be alive. I was checking trails near Klingman's Dome, the highest peak in our section. My boots crunched through fallen leaves as I walked the old Cherokee paths my ancestors had used for hundreds of years. That's when I met the hikers. 3 college boys from Tennessee, all wide-eyed and talking fast. They'd been camping for 2 days and looked like they hadn't slept much. The tall one with the red hair kept glancing back at the trees like something might jump out. "You gotta help us, Ranger," he said. "There's something weird up there. Really weird." I'd heard this before. City folks came to the mountains and got spooked by normal forest sounds. An owl hooting at night became a monster. A raccoon scratching became a ghost. But these boys seemed different. They were scared, sure, but not the jumpy kind of scared you get from too much imagination. "What did you see?" I asked, pulling out my notebook. The red-haired kid looked at his friends. "Tell him about the toll booth." "It wasn't a toll booth," the dark-haired one said. "It was like a checkpoint, made of sticks and stones, but all fancy. And there were these people." "People?" "Little people," the third boy whispered. "About 3 feet tall, maybe less. Wearing old-fashioned clothes, like from a play or something. They said we had to pay to go up the mountain." I stopped writing. "Pay what?" "That's just it, they wouldn't say. They just kept pointing at our backpacks and talking in some language we couldn't understand. When we tried to go around them, they got angry." The red-haired kid rolled up his sleeve. 3 long scratches ran from his wrist to his elbow, too deep and clean to be from branches. "We ran," he said, "all the way down here." I looked at the scratches. They were fresh, maybe 6 hours old. And they were strange, perfectly straight, like they'd been made with tiny knives. "Show me where this happened." The boys looked at each other. "We're not going back up there." "You don't have to. Just point me in the right direction." 20 minutes later, I was hiking alone up the old Indian Trail. The boys had described a spot about 2 miles up near a big rock formation that looked like a sleeping bear. I knew the place. It was one of the sacred sites my grandmother had told me about. Cherokee families used to leave offerings there for safe passage through the mountains. The forest felt different as I climbed higher. Too quiet. Birds should have been singing, but I could only hear my own footsteps and breathing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when I found the first one. A businessman in a gray suit was sitting on a fallen log about 50 yards off the trail. At first I thought he was just resting. Then I got closer and saw that something was very wrong. He was tiny, maybe 18 inches tall, sitting there in his perfect little suit, looking up at me with terrified eyes. "Help me," he whispered in a voice like a mouse. "Please help me." I knelt down, my hands shaking. "What happened to you?" "The court," he said. "The mountain court. They took me 3 days ago. I was just hiking and then..." He gestured at his small body. "They did this to me." I'd seen a lot of strange things in Fort Tees in years of ranger work. Bears walking on 2 legs in the distance. Lights in the forest that couldn't be explained. Sounds that made no sense. But I'd never seen anything like this. "How many of you are there?" I asked. 6 that I know of, maybe more. They keep us in cages made of gold wire. Beautiful cages, but still cages. They let me out today to look for more people, to bring them back." "Why?" The tiny man's face crumpled. "They're building an army. They say the mountain belongs to them and humans are trespassing. They want to make examples of us." My radio crackled. "Ted, you copy?" I grabbed it. "Yeah, Bill, what's up?" "Got more hikers down here reporting weird stuff. Little people demanding payment. You find anything?" I looked at the shrunken man. "I'm still investigating. Give me another hour." "Copy that. But Ted, my compass is going crazy up here. Needles spinning like a washing machine." I checked my own compass. The needle swung back and forth, never settling on any direction. My altimeter read 8,000 feet, which was impossible. Klingman's dome was only 6,743 feet high. "I need to get you out of here," I told the tiny businessman. "You can't carry me far," he said. "And they'll know. They always know when someone takes us away from the mountain." "Who are they?" "The court. The nobles. They've been here longer than anyone remembers. Your people, the Cherokee. They made a deal with them long ago. But the court says the deal is broken now." My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "The Nunahai are older than the mountains themselves, Theodore. They were here when the first Cherokee came, and they'll be here when the last ones leave. Always remember, respect the old places." A sound drifted down from higher up the mountain. Music, but not like any music I'd ever heard. It sounded like wind chimes made of bones, playing a tune that made my skin crawl. "They're calling," the tiny man whispered. "I have to go back. If I don't, they'll hurt the others." "Wait!" But he was already running into the trees, his little legs carrying him fast. Than should have been possible. I was alone again, but not really alone. The forest was watching me. I could feel eyes everywhere, measuring me, judging me. The music got louder, and now I could hear voices underneath it. High, sweet voices singing words in a language that was almost familiar. Cherokee, but older than any Cherokee I'd ever heard. My radio crackled again. Static, then Bill's voice. "Ted, something's wrong. I'm getting smaller. The trees are getting bigger. Ted, help me." Then nothing but static. I started running up the trail. The music got louder as I climbed higher. It wasn't coming from any instruments I could recognize. It sounded like the mountain itself was singing. My boots slipped on wet leaves, and I noticed that the temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since I'd started climbing. Everything looked wrong. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching down like arms trying to grab me. Shadows moved when there was no wind to move them. And the smell, it was like flowers, but flowers that had been dead for 100 years. I found Bill's radio first. It was sitting on a moss-covered rock, still crackling with static. His ranger hat was next to it, but Bill was nowhere to be seen. "Bill!" I called out. "Where are you?" "Down here!" The voice was thin and scared. "Ted! Down here!" I looked around, then down at my feet. Bill was standing next to his own hat, which now looked like a green circus tent compared to his size. He was maybe 2 feet tall, staring up at me with eyes full of fear. "They got me, Ted," he said. "Soon as I stepped into that ring of mushrooms over there, soon as my foot touched the inside, I just started shrinking." I looked where he pointed. A perfect circle of white mushrooms, each one about the size of my fist, formed a ring 20 feet across. The grass inside the ring was a different color, deeper green, almost glowing. And in the center of the ring stood something that made my breath catch. It looked like a doorway made of living wood. 2 oak trees had grown together, their branches twisting into an arch. Through the arch I could see more forest, but it was wrong. The trees beyond were massive, hundreds of feet tall, and they glowed with soft blue light. "Don't go in there," Bill said. "Whatever you do, don't step inside that ring." But as he spoke, I heard another voice, a woman's voice, calling from beyond the wooden arch. "Theodore Stonecrow," it said. "We have been waiting for you." I knew that voice. It was my grandmother's voice, but younger. The way she might have sounded when she was 20. "Your grandmother made promises, Theodore," the voice continued. "Promises that must be kept." "Don't listen," Bill whispered. "It's not her. It can't be her." But I was already walking toward the ring. I couldn't help myself. The voice was pulling me forward like a rope around my chest. "The Cherokee and the Mountain Court had an agreement," the voice said. "But your people broke it. They brought strangers to our sacred places. They let them build roads and cut down ancient trees. The debt must be paid." I stopped at the edge of the mushroom ring. Up close, I could see that each mushroom had tiny symbols carved into its stem. Cherokee writing, but older than anything I'd learned in school. "Step forward, Theodore," the voice said. "Come home." I lifted my foot to step over the mushrooms. "Ted, no!" Bill grabbed my boot with both hands, but he was too small to stop me. My foot touched the grass inside the ring. The world exploded into color and sound. The trees around me shot up like rockets, growing taller and taller until their tops disappeared into clouds. The sky turned deep purple, and stars came out even though it was still daytime. The ground beneath my feet felt soft and warm, like it was alive. But I was still my normal size. The magic had affected Bill when he stepped in, but not me. "Interesting," said a new voice. I spun around. A figure stood by the wooden arch, tall for one of the little people, maybe 4 feet high, wearing robes that seemed to be made of leaves and moonlight. Its face was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, with eyes like deep water and skin that glowed softly. "You are protected," it said. "Your blood carries the old agreements. But your friend," it gestured at Bill, who was now about the size of a Ken doll, "he has no such protection." "Change him back," I said. The figure laughed, and the sound was like silver bells falling on stone. "I am merely a herald. The court will decide what happens to all trespassers." "What court?" "Come and see." It turned and walked through the wooden arch. After a moment I followed, with Bill riding on my shoulder like a tiny hitchhiker. The world beyond the arch was like stepping into a fairy tale, but the scary kind, where children get eaten by witches. The trees were massive, their trunks wider than school buses. Flowers the size of dinner plates hung from vines, glowing with their own light. And everywhere, carved into the living wood of the trees, were buildings. Not built into the trees, carved out of them. Staircases spiraled up the trunks, balconies jutted out from branches. Windows glowed warmly from inside hollow sections. It was a city grown from the forest itself, and it was full of the little people. They came out to watch us pass, dozens of them, all dressed in clothes that looked like they'd been stolen from a Renaissance fair. Rich fabrics in deep colors, jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight, crowns and circlets made of twisted branches. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, like angels who'd decided to become demons for fun. "Ted," Bill whispered in my ear, "look at their eyes." I looked closer. Every single one of them had the same eyes, black as deep water with no pupils or irises, just endless darkness that seemed to go on forever. The herald led us to the largest tree, one so massive that a highway could have run through its trunk. Carved into its base was a great hall, with pillars made of living wood and a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single enormous root, sat the Mountain King. He was bigger than the others, still small by human standards, but clearly their ruler. His crown was made of antlers that seemed to grow from his own head, and his robes were the deep green of old forest moss. When he looked at me, I felt like a mouse being watched by a hawk. "Theodore Stonecrow," he said, and his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Welcome to our court." The hall was full of the little people, nobles, I guessed, based on their fancy clothes. They sat on benches carved from mushrooms, all watching me with those terrible black eyes. "Your people have broken the old agreements," the king continued. "For 200 years, we honored the treaty your ancestors made with us. We stayed hidden. We allowed passage through our lands. We asked only for respect and occasional offerings." I found my voice. "What treaty?" "The Treaty of the Deep Woods, signed in blood by your great-great-grandmother, Standing Bear Woman. She promised that the Cherokee would remember the old ways, would teach their children to respect the sacred places." One of the nobles stood up. This one looked female, with a crown of twisted silver on her head. "But they did not keep their promises," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "They brought strangers. They allowed the cutting of sacred trees. They built roads through our most holy places. And so we are taking what is owed," the king said. "The mountain belongs to us. We will make examples of all trespassers." He gestured to one side of the hall. I turned and saw them, about a dozen human beings, all shrunk down to the size of dolls, sitting in beautiful golden cages that hung from the ceiling like bird cages. They looked down at me with desperate eyes. "Choose," the king said. "Join them as our pets or face our justice." "What kind of justice?" The king smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp. "Trial by ordeal. 3 tasks, each more difficult than the last. Succeed, and we will release all our prisoners and honor you as a friend of the court. Fail." He didn't need to finish. I could see the answer in those black eyes. "I accept," I said. Bill grabbed my ear. "Ted, you can't. This is crazy." But I was thinking of my grandmother's stories. She'd always said the Nunahai were fair in their own way. They kept their bargains, even when it cost them. "What are the tasks?" I asked. The king leaned forward on his throne. "First, you must retrieve the golden acorn from the crown oak. But you must do it as one of us. We will make you small, and you must climb the tree with your own hands." I looked up at the prisoners in their cages. They were watching me with hope in their eyes. "When do we start?" I said. The king raised his hand, and I felt a strange tingling all over my body, like my skin was full of electricity. The world around me started growing larger and larger, or maybe I was getting smaller and smaller. Either way, the throne room became a vast cathedral, with the king looming above me like a mountain. When it stopped, I was about 3 feet tall, the same size as the court nobles. Bill, who had been riding on my shoulder, was now eye level with me. "At least we're the same size now," he said, trying to sound brave. "The crown oak stands at the heart of our realm," the king announced. His voice now sounded like it was coming from the sky itself. "Bring us the golden acorn from its highest branch, but beware, the tree is protected by its guardian." 2 of the nobles led us out of the throne room and deeper into the forest city. Everything was different at this size. Flowers I could have stepped over before now towered above my head like colorful umbrellas. Streams I could have jumped across were now rushing rivers. And the sounds, everything was louder, more intense. A bird singing somewhere above sounded like an opera singer. The crown oak stood in a clearing at the center of the tree city. It was the biggest tree I'd ever seen, even bigger than the throne room tree. Its trunk was so wide I couldn't see where it ended, and its branches reached up into the purple sky like the arms of a giant. High up, maybe 200 feet above us, I could see a single golden light glowing among the leaves. "The golden acorn," one of our guides said. "It holds the power of growth and life. Bring it to the king and you will have completed the first task." I looked up at the massive trunk. The bark was rough and full of handholds, but 200 feet was a long way to climb when you're only 3 feet tall. "What's the guardian?" I asked. My guide smiled that sharp-toothed smile. "You will see." I started climbing. The bark was easier to grip than I'd expected. My smaller hands could find holds that would have been impossible at normal size. But it was still exhausting work. Every few feet I had to stop and rest, my muscles burning with effort. Bill stayed on the ground, too scared to climb. "Be careful, Ted," he called up. "If you fall from there, you'll be pancake." I was about halfway up when I heard the buzzing. It started soft, like a bee flying nearby. But it got louder and louder until it sounded like a chainsaw. I looked around, trying to find the source. That's when I saw it. A wasp the size of a small airplane was flying toward me, its huge black eyes reflecting my tiny form. Its stinger was as long as a sword, and it looked very, very angry. "Guardian Wasp," one of the nobles called from below. "Do not let it sting you, or you will sleep for 100 years. The wasp circled the tree trunk, getting closer with each pass. I pressed myself against the bark, trying to become invisible, but it had already spotted me. It came in fast, stinger first. I rolled to the side just as the stinger punched into the bark where I'd been. The wasp struggled to pull it free, and I saw my chance. I grabbed a loose piece of bark and threw it as hard as I could. It hit the wasp right between the eyes. The giant insect buzzed angrily and backed off, then came at me again. This time I was ready. As it charged, I jumped to a different part of the trunk, using my small size to move quickly between the bark ridges. The wasp tried to follow, but it was too big to maneuver in the tight spaces. After a few more attempts, it gave up and flew away, probably to find easier prey. I kept climbing. My hands were bleeding from the rough bark and my legs felt like rubber, but I could see the golden acorn getting closer. It hung from a branch about 20 feet above me, glowing like a tiny sun. The final stretch was the hardest. The branches up here were thin and swayed in the wind. More than once I thought I was going to fall and splatter on the ground far below. But finally I reached the branch where the acorn hung. It was beautiful, pure gold, but alive somehow, warm to the touch and humming with power. As soon as I picked it up, I felt strength flowing back into my tired muscles. Getting down was faster but scarier. I half climbed, half slid down the massive trunk, using the golden acorn's power to keep from falling. When I finally reached the ground, my legs gave out and I collapsed in the moss. The nobles who had been watching gathered around me. "The first task is complete," one said, "but there are 2 more. They led me back to the throne room where the king waited. I placed the golden acorn at the foot of his throne. "Well done," he rumbled. "But the second task will test your mind, not just your courage." He gestured, and the wall of the throne room became transparent. Beyond it, I could see a rushing stream that cut through the forest like a silver ribbon. "Make the water, or flow uphill," the king said. "For 1 full hour, the stream must flow backwards, from low ground to high ground. Use whatever means you can think of, but you may not touch the water with your hands." This was impossible. Water doesn't flow uphill. It's basic physics. But then I remembered what my grandmother used to say. The Nunahai don't think like humans, Theodore. What seems impossible to us might be simple to them. I studied the stream through the transparent wall. It flowed from a high spring in the mountains down through the forest to a lower pool. But maybe I could change where it wanted to go. "I'll need help," I said, "and tools." "Name them," the king said. "Stones. Lots of stones. And some of your people who aren't afraid to get wet." For the next hour, I directed a team of court nobles in building a series of small dams across the stream. We didn't stop the water completely. Instead, we channeled it into a series of pools that climbed up the hillside like giant steps. Water flowed from the main stream into the first pool. When that pool filled up, it overflowed into a channel that led to a higher pool. That pool filled and overflowed into an even higher pool. Step by step, we created a water staircase that carried the stream uphill. It wasn't really making water flow uphill. It was using the water's own weight and gravity to lift itself to higher and higher levels, like a series of locks on a canal but made from stones and mud. The king watched the whole process in silence. When the water finally reached the highest pool, actually above the level of the original spring, he nodded slowly. "Clever," he said. "You understand that sometimes the impossible becomes possible if you change how you think about it. The second task is complete." I felt a surge of hope. 2 down, 1 to go. "The third task," the king said, and his voice grew serious, "will test your heart." He gestured again, and a large gray stone rolled into the center of the throne room. It was about the size of a refrigerator, smooth and featureless. "Make this stone weep to it." "Ears," the king said. "Real tears, born of real sorrow. If you can do this, all prisoners will be freed, and you will be honored as a friend of our court forever." I stared at the stone. How do you make a rock cry? It was just mineral and crystal, no nerves or emotions or tear ducts. But then I thought about my grandmother again, and all the stories she'd told me. Stories about the Trail of Tears, when the Cherokee people were forced to leave their homeland and march west to Oklahoma. Thousands died on that journey. Families were separated. An entire culture was nearly destroyed. Maybe the stone couldn't cry, but maybe I could cry for it. I sat down next to the stone and began to tell the story. I told it the way my grandmother had told it to me in Cherokee, with all the old words and phrases that carried the weight of history. I told about the soldiers coming to take families from their homes, about children dying in the cold rain, about elders who couldn't keep up and were left behind. As I spoke, something strange happened. The nobles around the throne room began to listen. Really listen. Their sharp, beautiful faces grew sad. Some of them started to make soft sounds like crying. And the stone began to change. It started as just a few drops of water beating on its surface. But as my story continued, as I poured all the grief and loss of my people into my words, more water appeared. The drops became trickles. The trickles became streams. The stone was crying. Real tears, born of real sorrow. Not its own sorrow, but sorrow it had absorbed from my story, from the pain of the Cherokee people, from centuries of loss and struggle. When I finished the story, the stone was streaming with water like a fountain. The king stood up from his throne, and for the first time, his terrible black eyes looked almost human. "The third task is complete," he said softly. You have reminded us that even stones can weep if they hear enough sorrow." The king raised his hand, and I felt the tingling sensation again. The world shrank around me, or I grew, until I was back to my normal size. Bill grew too, relief flooding his face as he became human-sized again. "You have proven yourself worthy, Theodore Stonecrow," the king said. "But before we honor our bargain, you must understand something. We did not create this situation for sport." The transparent wall showed the view outside the court, the real forest, where normal-sized trees grew and normal-sized animals lived. But now I could see things I'd missed before. Clear-cut areas where ancient trees had been felled, streams polluted with runoff from construction sites, roads cutting through sacred groves. "Your people, all people, have forgotten the old agreements," the king continued. "They take from the land without giving back. They build without asking permission. They treat the forest like a thing to be used instead of a living being to be respected." I thought about the hiking trails I maintained, the campgrounds I cleaned, the visitors I helped every day. Most of them were good people who loved the mountains. But some treated the forest like their personal playground, leaving trash and cutting branches and disturbing wildlife. "We are not evil, Theodore," said the queen, the female noble who had spoken before. "But we are old, and we are tired of being ignored. These prisoners we have taken, They represent all that will protect our sacred places while allowing respectful humans to visit. What kind of agreement? The Queen answered. Certain areas of these mountains will be declared off limits to all humans. Others will remain open, but with conditions. And you, Theodore Stonecrow, will serve as our ambassador to your people. Ambassador? You will help us identify those who threaten the sacred places. You will guide respectful visitors and turn away those who come with harmful intent. In exchange, we will share our knowledge with you, knowledge that will help you protect the entire forest. I looked at the prisoners in their cages. I thought about Bill, who had been shrunk just for stepping in the wrong place. I thought about all the people who might face the same fate if this conflict continued. What happens to my normal life, my job as a ranger? The king smiled, and for the first time it didn't look threatening. You will remain a ranger, but you will become much more effective at your job. We will teach you to see the forest as we see it. Every plant, every animal, every stone. You will know when someone enters with harmful intent, and you will be able to guide them away before they cause damage. And if they refuse to be guided? The Queen's smile was sharper. Then they will face the same fate as these prisoners. But we hope, with your help, that will rarely be necessary. I thought about it. It wasn't really a choice. I couldn't leave those people trapped in cages, and I couldn't let the court continue shrinking innocent hikers. But maybe it was also an opportunity. Maybe I could help both sides understand each other. I accept, I said. The king nodded. Then let us begin the new agreement. He raised his hands and the golden cages opened. The prisoners tumbled out, growing back to normal size as they fell. They looked around in confusion, then started running toward the wooden arch that led back to the normal world. Wait, I called after them. You need to understand. But they were already gone, fleeing through the portal. Do not worry, the Queen said. We will modify their memories. They will remember only a strange dream about getting lost in the forest. But you, Theodore, you will remember everything. I felt something change inside my head, like a door opening. Suddenly, I could see the forest in a completely different way. Every tree had a glow around it that showed its health. Every stream sparkled with information about the creatures that lived in it. Every rock formation hummed with the history of what had happened there. And I could feel the presence of the court nobles scattered throughout the mountains, watching and protecting their sacred places. This is your gift, the king said, and your burden. You will age more quickly because of it. The magic has a price, but you will be able to protect both worlds, human and fey. I felt the truth of his words. My hair was already turning gray at the temples, and my hands looked older than they had an hour ago. How long do I have? Perhaps 10 years, the Queen said softly. Long enough to train a successor, if you choose wisely. Bill grabbed my arm. Ted, we should go. This is all too much. But I shook my head. This is exactly what needs to happen, Bill. Someone has to bridge the gap between their world and ours. The king walked us back to the wooden arch. Remember, Theodore, respect must be earned by both sides. We will honor this agreement as long as your people do the same. We stepped through the portal, and the fairy ring dissolved behind us. The mushrooms crumbled to dust, and the wooden arch became just 2 normal oak trees again. But I could still feel the connection, like a thread leading back to the court. Bill and I hiked down the mountain in silence. When we reached the ranger station, I sat down to write my report. What are you going to tell them? Bill asked. I thought about it. Mass hallucination caused by toxic spores from mush, rooms. Recommend that area be temporarily closed to hikers while we study the contamination. That's not what really happened. No, I said, but it's what they need to hear. The truth would just cause panic. I finished the report and filed it away. Then I got out a map of the mountains and started marking the areas I now knew were sacred to the court. Some would have to be closed completely. Others could remain open with careful management. It was going to be a long 10 years. That was 5 years ago. I've kept my word to the Mountain King, and he's kept his. The sacred areas are protected now, marked as environmentally sensitive zones in all the park literature. Most visitors respect the boundaries. Those who don't, well, they usually find themselves getting lost and eventually wander back to the main trails with no memory of how they got turned around. The court has been more subtle than they used to be. My hair is completely white now, and my hands shake sometimes when I write reports. The magic is taking its toll, just like the king warned. But I've also prevented dozens of conflicts between the human and fey worlds. Hikers who might have vanished forever instead get gently redirected to safer paths. Developers who want to build in sacred areas find their surveys mysteriously inaccurate, and I've been training my replacement. Sarah Woodpecker is young, only 25, but she has Cherokee blood and the right kind of respect for the old ways. She doesn't know about the court yet, but she's noticed the strange things, the way certain areas of the forest feel different, the sounds that don't match any known animal, the lights that dance between the trees on moonless nights. Yesterday, she came to me with a story about hikers who claimed they'd seen little people in fancy clothes near Klingman's Dome. "What do you think, Ted?" she asked. "Should we investigate?" I looked at her carefully. She was ready. It was time. "Pack your gear," I told her. "We're going hiking." As we prepared to leave, I thought about the businessman I'd met that first day, the one who'd been shrunk by the court's magic. I never saw him again, but sometimes I wonder if he remembers what really happened to him. If he wakes up from dreams about golden cages and mountain kings. Bill retired last year. He never talked about what happened in the court, but sometimes I'd catch him staring at mushroom rings with a worried expression. He knows the truth is still out there, waiting in the shadows between the trees. The forest watches everything. That's what I've learned in these 5 years as the court's ambassador. Every footstep, every broken branch, every piece of litter left behind, it all matters. The mountains have a long memory, and they don't forgive easily, but they can learn to trust again if you show them proper respect. Tonight, I'll take Sarah up the old Cherokee Trail. I'll show her the places where the normal world brushes against something older and stranger. And if she's worthy, if she has the courage and wisdom to accept the truth, I'll introduce her to the Mountain King's court. The sacred places need a guardian. They always have. And the guardians need to remember that they're not just protecting trees and rocks and streams. They're protecting the doorways between worlds, the thin places where magic still lives and breathes. The Cherokee have a saying, "The land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land." I've learned that it's more true than I ever imagined. The land is alive, and it's watching, always watching. My name is Jackson Hawthorne, but everyone calls me Jack. I've been a forest ranger for 19 years now, working the backcountry of Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. At 42, I know these mountains like the back of my weathered hands. Every cave, every ridge, every hidden trail that city folks never see. I should tell you right up front, I'm not the hero type. My ex-wife Sarah made that clear enough when she left 3 years ago, taking my kids with her. "You care more about those damn mountains than your own family," she said. Maybe she was right. Maybe drowning my Vietnam memories in Jim Beam every night wasn't the best way to be a father. But I'm good at my job. Real good. When people get lost in these hills, when hikers disappear into cave systems that snake for miles underground, they call me. I've pulled more bodies out of Devil's Throat Cave than I care to count. Spelunkers think they know what they're doing until the limestone walls start closing in and their fancy headlamps die. It was August 15th, 1978, when everything changed. Hot as blazes that summer, the kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back even in the shade. I was finishing my shift when the call came through the radio. "Jack, we got 3 college kids missing up near Seneca Rocks. Supposed to check in yesterday morning. Parents are raising hell." I grabbed my gear. Cave rescue meant ropes, emergency oxygen, first aid kit, and the portable radio that barely worked down in the limestone. The missing kids were from Virginia Tech. 2 boys and a girl, all experienced climbers according to their families. They'd gotten permits to explore Devil's Throat Cave, one of the deepest systems in the area. The drive up to Seneca Rocks took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. These weren't the gentle rolling hills you see in postcards. This was old Appalachian wilderness, bayous. Here the trees grew thick and dark, where families had lived in hidden hollows for generations without ever seeing a government man. When I reached their campsite, my stomach dropped. 3 tents still set up, food hanging in bear bags, gear scattered around like they'd just stepped away for a minute. But their car keys were sitting on a log, and nobody goes caving without a way to drive home. The mouth of Devil's Throat Cave sat about 100 yards from their camp, a black hole in the limestone cliff face that always made me uneasy. Local folks had stories about that cave going back generations, but I'd never paid much attention to mountain superstition. What caught my attention was the rockfall. Fresh limestone chunks and dirt completely blocked the entrance. Now, rockfalls happen, but this looked wrong. Too neat, too much like someone had sealed it from the inside. I was setting up my equipment when I heard her coming down the trail. Old Emma Crane lived up on the ridge in a cabin her grandfather built. Mountain people called her a granny woman, someone who knew herbs and old remedies. She was maybe 70, with gray hair in a tight bun and eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You planning to go in there, Ranger Jack?" she asked, stopping at the edge of my work area. "Got 3 kids missing, Emma. This is where their trail ends." She shook her head slowly. "Ain't no good gonna come of opening that cave. Some things should stay buried." "What are you talking about?" Emma looked at the sealed entrance like it was a grave. "My grandmother told me stories about Devil's Throat, about the hollow singers who call souls home. They've been quiet for years now, but last night," she paused. "Last night I heard them singing again. 3 voices harmonizing like angels. But angels don't sing to steal your breath away." I'd heard enough mountain folklore to fill a book, but something in Emma's voice made my skin crawl. "Just old stories, Emma." "Maybe so." She turned to leave, then looked back. "But if you hear singing down there, Ranger Jack, you run. You run, and don't look back." 2 hours later, I had enough of the rockfall cleared to squeeze through. My headlamp cut through the darkness, showing smooth limestone walls that disappeared into black nothing. The air felt wrong, too cold for August, too still, like the cave was holding its breath. I followed standard search protocol, marking my path with chalk arrows every 20 feet. The main tunnel sloped downward for maybe 50 yards before opening into a larger chamber. That's where I found the first sign of the missing students. 3 headlamps sat on a flat rock, still working, casting wild shadows on the cave walls. Beside them lay a coil of climbing rope and a helmet with Jenny written in marker on the side. But no sign of the kids themselves. I keyed my radio. Nothing but static. Radio signals never worked well underground, but this was different. A strange buzzing that almost sounded like whispers. That's when I heard it. Singing. Faint at first, coming from deeper in the cave system. Multiple voices harmonizing, all female, singing something that sounded like a lullaby. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, the kind of sound that made you want to follow it no matter where it led. But Emma's warning echoed in my head. I forced myself to stop and listen carefully. The singing wasn't coming from just one direction. It seemed to echo through the limestone, bouncing off walls and flowing through passages like water. I followed the left tunnel, marking my way. The temperature kept dropping, and soon I could see my breath in the beam of my headlamp. In August. Underground in West Virginia. That wasn't natural. The tunnel opened into a smaller chamber, and that's where I found him. The boy couldn't have been more than 20. He sat with his back against the cave wall, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. His skin had a gray pallor, and frost covered his hair and eyebrows. And I called out, rushing over, "You okay? Can you hear me?" He didn't respond. When I touched his shoulder, his skin felt like ice, but he was breathing. Shallow, slow breaths that came out as white puffs in the frigid air. His eyes were open, but completely dilated, pupils so large I couldn't see any color. Most disturbing of all, he was humming. The same melody I'd been hearing, a soft, wordless tune that seemed to come from deep in his chest. I checked for injuries but found nothing obvious. No bleeding, no broken bones, but his pulse was dangerously slow. Classic signs of severe hypothermia, which made no sense in these conditions. "What's your name?" I asked, shining my light in his face. "Where are your friends?" He just kept humming, that haunting melody that made something deep in my brain itch with wrongness. I tried to lift him, but he was dead weight. 200 pounds of limp college student, and I still had to find the other two. I couldn't carry him out alone, not through narrow cave passages. I keyed my radio again, hoping for better luck. Still nothing but that strange static. But underneath the white noise, I could swear I heard voices. Faint, female voices, singing the same melody the kid was humming. The smart thing would have been to mark this location and go for help. But rangers don't leave people behind, especially not kids who looked like they were dying of exposure. I decided to find the other two students first, then figure out how to get all three out safely. I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around the humming boy, though it didn't seem to help much. Following the chalk arrows back to the main chamber, I took the right tunnel this time. The singing got louder as I went deeper, no longer faint and distant, but clear and present, like the singers were just around the next bend. The tunnel curved sharply, and my headlamp illuminated something that made me stop cold. Handprints. Dozens of them pressed into the soft limestone walls. But these weren't normal human hands. The fingers were too long, with too many joints, and the palms were narrow and elongated. They covered both walls of the tunnel like some kind of bizarre art installation. I played my light over them carefully. Some looked fresh, the limestone still soft around the edges. Others were old, worn smooth by time and moisture. How old I couldn't guess, but some looked like they'd been there for decades. The singing was coming from just ahead now, clear enough that I could almost make out words. Almost, but not quite. Like listening to a foreign language that sounded familiar but made no sense. I rounded another curve and found the second student. She hung from the ceiling. Not literally hanging. There was no rope, no equipment. She just floated there, 6 feet off the cave floor, arms spread wide like she was being held by invisible hands. Her blonde hair drifted around her face like she was underwater. Her eyes were closed, and she was singing. The same melody, the same haunting harmony, but now I could see it coming from a living person. Her lips moved in perfect sync with the voices I'd been hearing, and frost covered her clothes like she'd been there for hours. "Jenny!" I shouted, because the helmet back in the main chamber had her name on it. "Jenny, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened, completely white. No iris, no pupil, just solid white, like she'd gone blind. But she looked right at me and smiled. Then she spoke in a voice like winter wind through bare trees. "Come closer, Jackson. Come sing with us." I ran. Not proud of it, but 20 years of Vietnam and forest service had taught me to recognize when I was in over my head. A girl floating in midair with white eyes was definitely over my head. I stumbled through the tunnels, following my chalk marks back toward the entrance. My radio crackled with static, and underneath the white noise I could hear them, all three voices now, harmonizing in that awful, beautiful song that made my teeth ache. When I reached the main chamber, I found the humming boy exactly where I'd left him. Still alive, still breathing, still making that soft humming sound. But now there was frost covering the rock around him, spreading outward like ice flowers. I tried the radio one more time. Nothing. Whatever was happening in this cave, I was on my own. The smart thing was to get help. Call in a full rescue team. Maybe some kind of specialist who dealt with whatever the hell this was. But that would take hours, and I had a strong feeling these kids didn't have hours. I was studying my map, trying to figure out if there was another way into the cave system, when I heard footsteps. "Jack, you down there?" Marie Blackburn's voice echoed from the entrance tunnel. She was another ranger, newer than me but good at her job. We'd worked together on cave rescues before. "Down here," I called back. "Bring rope and emergency blankets." She appeared a few minutes later, loaded down with gear. Marie was maybe 30, tough as leather, with short brown hair and calloused hands. She took one look at the humming boy and swore under her breath, "Jesus, Jack. What happened to him?" I don't know. Found him like this. The other two are deeper in the system. I hesitated. Marie, have you ever seen anything strange in these caves? She was checking the boy's pulse, frowning at what she found. Strange how? I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the floating girl or the handprints. It sounded crazy, even in my own head. Just strange. Weird noises, temperature changes. These old limestone caves play tricks on you. Sound bounces around. Cold air gets trapped in pockets. She looked up at me. Why? What did you see down there? Before I could answer, the singing started again. Louder now, clear enough that Marie heard it too. Her head snapped up and she looked toward deeper tunnels with a puzzled expression. That's beautiful, she said softly. Sounds like a church choir. Marie, we need to get this kid out of here, now. But she wasn't listening. She stood up slowly, her eyes getting that distant look I'd seen on the humming boy's face. The singing got louder, more complex, like more voices were joining the harmony. Marie! She started walking toward the tunnel where I'd found Jenny. I grabbed her arm, but she shook me off with surprising strength. Don't you hear them, Jack? They're calling us home. I pulled out my emergency whistle and blew it as hard as I could. The sharp, piercing sound echoed off the cave walls, and for a moment the singing stopped completely. Marie blinked and looked around in confusion. What? Where was I going? Away from here. We're leaving. Now. I helped her get the boy into a rescue harness, and we started dragging him toward the entrance. But we'd only gone 20 feet when the singing started again, and this time it was different. This time they were singing my name. Jackson, Jackson, come home, Jackson. 3 voices in perfect harmony, calling me like my mother used to when I was a kid playing in the woods behind our house. Sweet and loving and impossible to ignore. I found myself slowing down, letting go of the rescue rope. The voices were so beautiful, so welcoming. They promised peace, rest, an end to all the nightmares and guilt and loneliness that had been eating at me since Vietnam. Marie grabbed my shoulder. Jack, something's wrong with the cave. I looked around and nearly dropped my headlamp. The limestone walls were moving, not fast, but steady and obvious, like they were breathing. In and out, like the entire cave system was alive, and the handprints were multiplying. As I watched, new ones appeared in the soft stone, those elongated, too many jointed fingers pressing into the walls like the cave was full of invisible people trying to get out. We need to find the other 2 kids, Marie said, but her voice sounded strange, like she was Tolled, king in her sleep. No, we need to get out of here. The singing got louder, more insistent. Now I could hear individual words in a language that wasn't English but somehow felt familiar. They were calling all our names now. Jackson, Marie, even the humming boy who I now realized was named David. Come home, come sing, come sleep in the stone. Marie let go of the rescue rope and started walking back into the cave. This time when I grabbed her, she fought me, clawing at my hands with her fingernails. Let me go, they need us. Can't you hear them calling? I blew the whistle again, longer and harder. The singing stopped, and Marie collapsed like someone had cut her puppet strings. But in the sudden silence, I heard something else. Footsteps, multiple sets coming from deeper in the cave system. Soft, barefoot steps on stone, getting closer. I didn't wait to see what was making them. I grabbed Marie under her arms and dragged her toward the entrance, leaving David behind. I hated myself for it. But whatever was in this cave was spreading, getting stronger, and I couldn't save anyone if I got caught too. We made it maybe 30 yards before Marie started fighting again, screaming that I was taking her away from her family, that the voices were her sisters calling her home. I had to hit her, not hard, just enough to daze her and carry her the rest of the way. When we reached the sealed entrance, I could hear them behind us. Not just footsteps now, but voices. Real voices, not just singing. Women's voices, speaking in that strange, familiar language, getting closer and closer. I pushed Marie through the gap in the rockfall and squeezed out after her. The moment we hit sunlight, she collapsed again, gasping and shaking like she'd been underwater for too long. "What happened?" she whispered. "Jack, what was that place?" I looked back at the cave entrance. The singing. G had stopped, but I could feel something watching us from the darkness beyond the rocks. Something patient and hungry and very, very old. "I don't know," I said. "But we're not going back. In there alone." 2 hours later, we came back with everything we could carry. Portable lights, more rope, emergency flares, and Marie's idea, a portable air horn loud enough to wake the dead. If noise could break whatever spell those voices cast, we'd have enough noise to level a mountain. We also brought dynamite. Marie thought I was crazy when I suggested it, but I'd seen enough. 3 college kids were dying in that cave, trapped by something that shouldn't exist. If we couldn't get them out, we'd have to force the cave to give them up. The humming boy, David, was worse when we went back in. Ice covered his whole body now, and his humming had gotten quieter, like he was running out of breath. But he was still alive, still trapped in whatever spell held him. We rigged him with ropes and pulleys, set up a system to haul him out fast when the time came. Then we went deeper. The handprints had spread. They covered every surface now, overlapping and intertwining like a mad artist's fever dream. Some were small, child-sized. Others were huge, with fingers that stretched longer than my forearm. All of them had too many joints. "Jack," Marie whispered, playing her light over the walls. "How long has this cave been here?" "Limestone's been here for millions of years, but these tunnels, maybe hundreds of thousands. That's a lot of time for things to die down here." The singing started again as we approached the chamber where I'd found Jenny. But this time it was different. Sadder. More desperate. Like they knew we were coming and didn't want us to see what they'd become. Jenny was still floating in the chamber, but she wasn't alone anymore. 2 other women hung in the air beside her. One wore a dress that might have been white once, but was now stained gray with cave moisture and age. The other wore what looked like a Civil War-era mourning dress, all black lace and buttons, rotted and torn. All 3 had the same white, pupilless eyes. All 3 were singing. But Jenny was changing. Her skin had gone gray like David's, and frost covered her clothes. As I watched, her body began to shimmer, becoming translucent like the other 2. "Jesus Christ," Marie breathed. "What are they?" The women in old dresses turned to look at us. When they opened their mouths to sing, I could see that their teeth were too sharp, too numerous, filling their mouths like a shark's. "Banshees," I said, remembering Emma's words. "The hollow singers. They're turning her into one of them." The 3rd student, a boy named Tommy according to his student ID, sat on the cave floor beneath the floating women. He was conscious, but barely, frost covering his dark hair, humming along with their song. Half of his body had already crystallized, turned to living limestone that still breathed and sang. "Come closer," Jenny said in that winter wind voice. "Come sing with us, Jackson. Come sleep in the stone." I raised the air horn and let it blast. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off limestone walls like gunshots. All 3 women screamed, not the beautiful singing anymore, but harsh, angry shrieks that made my ears ring. They dropped out of the air, hitting the cave floor hard. For a moment, they looked almost human again, frightened, confused, vulnerable. "Tommy," Marie shouted. "Can you hear me?" The boy's eyes cleared slightly. "Cold," he whispered. "So cold. Can't feel my legs." Marie ran to him while I kept the air horn ready. The banshees were pulling themselves up, their movements jerky and wrong, like broken marionettes. Jenny looked at me with those white eyes, and for just a second, I saw the real girl underneath. Terrified, trapped, begging for help. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want to sing forever." Then the white returned to her eyes, and she opened her mouth in a scream that bypassed my ears and went straight to my soul. The other 2 joined her, and suddenly the cave was full of sound that wasn't quite sound. Something that grabbed my thoughts and tried to drag them into the dark. I saw my dead Vietnam buddies calling me from a rice paddy. I saw Sarah taking the kids and driving away while I did nothing. I saw every failure, every moment of cowardice, every time I'd chosen the bottle over the people who needed me. You belong with us, the voices sang in my head. You belong in the stone, in the dark, in the cold. Come home, Jackson. Come sing with the hollow singers. My feet started moving without my permission. The air horn fell from my hands, clattering on the stone floor. Behind me, I could hear Marie calling my name, but it sounded distant and unimportant. The banshees were beautiful now, floating again, their arms open to welcome me. Jenny smiled, and her face was kind and loving and peaceful. The other two beckoned with those elongated fingers, promising rest and silence and an end to all pain. I was 3 steps away when the explosion started. Marie had triggered the dynamite charges we'd set in the main tunnel. The cave shook, limestone dust raining from the ceiling. The banshee's song faltered, and for a moment I could think clearly again. "Marie!" I shouted. "Get Tommy and run!" She was already moving, dragging the semi-crystallized boy toward the tunnel. I grabbed the air horn and blasted it again, keeping the banshees confused and angry while Marie got Tommy to safety. But the explosions had done more than we'd planned. Cracks appeared in the chamber walls, spreading like spider webs. The ceiling sagged, and chunks of limestone began falling. The banshees rose into the air again, their faces twisted with rage. They sang together, all 3 voices focused on me like a weapon. I felt my blood begin to crystallize in my veins, ice spreading from my heart toward my extremities. "You cannot leave," Jenny said, her voice echoing from everywhere at once. "You've seen us. You know our song. You belong to the Hollow now." More explosions. The cave system was collapsing, sealing itself shut. I had maybe seconds before the whole place came down. I thought about Sarah and the kids. I thought about David, still trapped and humming in the main chamber. I thought about all the people who would come looking for us if we didn't make it out. Then I did something I'd never been able to do in Vietnam. I chose anger over fear. "Go to hell," I said, and triggered the last dynamite charge. The cave collapsed in sections, starting from the deep chambers and working outward. I rode the explosion wave through falling limestone and choking dust, following the chalk arrows Marie and I had left, racing the rockfall that wanted to bury me with the banshees. I found Marie in the main chamber, trying to drag both David and Tommy toward the entrance. The humming boy was worse. His whole body crystallized now, but still breathing, still alive somehow. Tommy was conscious but couldn't walk, the limestone still creeping up his legs. We got them out just as the main chamber ceiling fell in. Tons of rock sealed Devil's Throat Cave forever, cutting off that horrible singing that had been growing louder and more desperate as we escaped. The rescue helicopters found us an hour later. David never woke up. He died 3 days later in the hospital, his body temperature never rising above 90 degrees despite every effort to warm him. The doctors called it impossible, but he was gone. Tommy survived, though half his left leg had to be amputated. The limestone had somehow fused with his bone, and it was still growing when they cut it off. He doesn't remember much about the cave, just singing and cold and 3 women who wanted him to stay forever. Jenny was never found. The search teams dug for weeks, but there was no trace of her body in the collapsed tunnel. As sometimes I wonder if she's still down there, crystallized in some deep chamber, singing her lonely song to the dark. I wrote up a report about structural instability and cave-in danger. Marie backed me up. We agreed that some stories are too crazy for official records, especially when there's no proof left to find. But the Park Service sealed off every cave in a 20-mile radius. Geological instability, they said, public safety concern. They didn't ask too many questions about why we'd used enough dynamite to level a small building. I couldn't sleep for months after Devil's Throat. Every quiet moment I'd hear that singing, 3 voices harmonizing, calling my name, promising peace in the cold and dark. I'd wake up humming sometimes, that same melody that had trapped David. The drinking got worse before it got better. But eventually I realized something. I'd been to the dark place, the hollow where lost souls go to sing forever, and I'd chosen to come back. For the first time since Vietnam, I'd fought for something instead of running away. I quit the booze, called Sarah, tried to explain without sounding crazy why I wanted to see the kids again. She hung up on me the first 3 times, but eventually she listened. We're not back together. Too much damage for that. But I see Jenny and Michael every other weekend now. I transferred to a desert station in Arizona 6 months later. No caves there. Just sunshine and dry air and blessed silence. But I left detailed notes hidden in my old ranger station, sealed in an envelope marked, "For the next guy who hears singing in Devil's Throat." Because I know they're still down there. The hollow singers, the banshees, whatever you want to call them, waiting in chambers too deep for dynamite to reach, singing their patient songs to the limestone walls. And sometimes, when thunderstorms roll through these Arizona mountains and the wind howls just right through the canyons, I swear I can still hear them. 3 voices calling my name across 1,000 miles, harmonizing like angels, promising that someday I'll come home to sing with them forever. I keep an air horn in my truck now, just in case. Some caves should stay sealed. Some songs should never be heard. And if you're ever spelunking in the Appalachian Mountains and you hear beautiful singing echoing from the deep places, do what I should have done from the start. Run. And don't look back. My name is John Hillcrest, and I've been a park ranger for 18 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in the Georgia mountains, but nothing like what happened on Blood Mountain in 1969. I wish I could forget it all, but some memories stick to you like pine sap. I was 44 then, with a wife named Sarah and a teenage daughter, Emma. Before the Ranger service, I spent 4 years as an Army medic in Korea. I'd seen men die and helped put others back together. I thought I understood how minds break under pressure. I was wrong about a lot of things. The Chattahoochee National Forest was my territory, specifically the Blood Mountain area. Most folks know it as a popular hiking spot, but the Cherokee called it something else. The place where spirits cry. I always figured that was just old stories. Mountain people love their ghost tales. My job was visitor safety and mental health crisis response. The Forest Service added that second part after too many hikers came down from the mountains talking nonsense. Mountain madness, the locals called it. I called it altitude sickness mixed with too much time alone in the woods. The first real sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in September. 2 hikers stumbled into my ranger station, both talking at the same time in words that made no sense. They'd been normal college kids when they started their hike 3 days earlier. Now they couldn't stop muttering in what sounded like another language. "The mountain is alive," the girl kept saying. "It's angry. It's hungry." Her boyfriend just rocked back and forth, repeating words that sounded Cherokee but wrong somehow. Twisted. I called Doc Peterson in town. He'd been treating what he called mountain psychosis for months. Always the same symptoms. Perfectly rational people coming down from Blood Mountain talking about voices and spirits and things that want to hurt them. "It's the elevation," Doc said when he came to get the kids. "Some people can't handle the thin air up there." But I'd been checking the reports. All the incidents happened in the same area, between 3,800 and 4,200 feet on Blood Mountain's north face. Same elevation range every time. That wasn't random. I started keeping better records, mapping each incident. The pattern was too clear to ignore. Something was happening up there, and it wasn't altitude sickness. My supervisor, Bill Hutchins, thought I was losing it. "John, you're seeing patterns where there aren't any," he said. "People get spooked in the woods. That's all." But I knew better. I'd been in enough real trouble to recognize when something was hunting. The breakthrough came when I found the Cherokee elder, Thomas Crow Feather, at the general store in town. He was maybe 70, with hands like old leather and eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're the ranger asking about Blood Mountain," he said before I could introduce myself. "Yes, sir. People are getting sick up there. I'm trying to understand why." Thomas studied my face for a long moment. "Your people don't listen to our stories." "I'm listening now." He bought his coffee and walked outside. I followed. "My grandfather told me about that place," Thomas said quietly. "Long time ago, sky people fell from the stars. They brought bad medicine. made our warriors crazy, made them fight each other until the mountain ran red. Sky people? Not from here, not from this world. He looked up at Blood Mountain's peak, barely visible through the trees. We sealed that place, put warnings around it, but seals break. Bad medicine wakes up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about electromagnetic fields and brain chemistry. I'd read about magnetic anomalies affecting people's minds. Maybe the Cherokee stories were trying to explain so. Anything real. I decided to check the geological surveys. Blood Mountain had unusual mineral deposits, magnetite and hematite in concentrations that shouldn't exist naturally. The magnetic field readings were all wrong. Sarah found me at the kitchen table at 3 a.m, surrounded by maps and reports. "John, you're scaring me," she said. "You've been obsessed with this mountain for weeks." "Something's up there, Sarah. Something that's hurting people." She sat down beside me. "Then let someone else handle it. You don't have to save everyone." But I did have to. That's what rangers do. We protect people from the mountains, and sometimes we protect the mountains from people. Whatever was happening on Blood Mountain, it was my job to stop it. I just didn't know yet that some things can't be stopped, only survived. The next morning, I packed my gear and headed up Blood Mountain alone. I brought a radio, first aid kit, magnetic compass, and a small tape recorder. If something was affecting people's minds up there, I wanted evidence. The hike started normal enough. September air was crisp, leaves just starting to turn. I knew every trail, every rock formation. This was my mountain. But as I climbed higher, things started feeling wrong. Small things at first. Birds stopped singing around 3,500 feet. No squirrels or chipmunks. Even the insects went quiet. At 3,800 feet, I felt it, like someone watching me from the trees. I stopped and looked around, but saw nothing. Just that prickly feeling between my shoulder blades that meant danger. My compass started acting strange. The needle couldn't decide which way was north. It would point normally, then swing wildly, then settle on a direction that made no sense. I pulled out the tape recorder and described what I was seeing. When I played it back, there were voices in the background. Faint, but definitely there. Speaking words I didn't recognize. The voices weren't on the mountain when I recorded it. My hands started shaking as I climbed higher, not from cold or exhaustion, from fear that didn't make sense. Primal terror, like what animals feel before earthquakes. At 4,000 feet, I saw them. Cherokee warriors, maybe 20 of them, crouched behind trees and rocks. War paint on their faces, weapons ready. But they were transparent, like looking at people through smoke. They weren't looking at me. They were staring at something else. Something above me on the mountain. I followed their gaze and nearly dropped my radio. 3 figures stood on a rocky outcrop 50 yards up the slope. They looked human at first glance, but wrong in ways that made my brain hurt. Too tall, arms too long, skin that seemed to shift and crawl in the sunlight. One of them turned toward me and I saw its face, or where its face should have been. Just smooth skin with holes that might have been eyes. The Cherokee warriors attacked. I watched dead men fight impossible enemies in complete silence. No war cries, no clash of weapons, just ghostly figures moving through each other like mist. Then the vision ended, and I was alone on the mountain again. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran down that mountain like something was chasing me. Maybe something was. Back at the station, I called Dr. Rachel Stormwind at the medical college in Atlanta. She specialized in neurology and had written papers about environmental factors affecting brain function. "I need you to come up here," I told her. "Something's happening that doesn't make medical sense." "What kind of something?" "People are having identical hallucinations in a specific location. I think it might be related to magnetic field anomalies." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "That's actually possible. Strong electromagnetic fields can trigger temporal lobe seizures, cause hallucinations. I'll drive up tomorrow." That night I had the dream for the first time. I was standing in a cave deep inside Blood Mountain. The walls were covered with symbols that hurt yet to look at. In the center of the cave, something made of crystal and metal hummed with dark energy. When I woke up, I could still hear the humming. Dr. Stormwind arrived the next morning, with equipment I'd never seen before: EEG machines, electromagnetic field detectors, and recording devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. "If there's something up there affecting brain chemistry, we'll find it," she said. Rachel was maybe 35, with short brown hair and the kind of intense focus that made me think of bomb disposal experts. She approached everything like a puzzle that could be solved. We hiked up together, Rachel taking readings every 100 feet. The electromagnetic measurements went crazy at exactly 3,800 feet. "This is impossible," she muttered, checking her instruments. "These readings would require a magnetic source the size of a building." That's when we both saw the Cherokee warriors again. This time, Rachel saw them too. "John," she whispered, grabbing my arm, "are you seeing what I'm seeing?" The battle played out again, exactly like before. Warriors attacking the tall, wrong figures, fighting in perfect silence while the mountain watched. When it ended, Rachel was staring at her EEG readout. "Your brain activity just spiked in ways that should have caused a seizure, but you were completely conscious." "What does that mean?" "It means whatever's up here isn't just causing hallucinations. It's showing us something that really happened." We kept climbing. At 4,100 feet, we found the cave from my dream. It was hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural but wasn't. Someone had arranged those stones to block the entrance, recently. "The Cherokee sealed this place," I said, remembering Thomas Crow Feather's words. "Sealed what?" I moved some of the smaller rocks and shined my flashlight inside. The beam revealed a passage that went deep into the mountain, and from somewhere in that darkness came the humming I'd heard in my dreams. "Rachel, I think we should go back." But she was already unpacking more equipment. "John, this could be the scientific discovery of the century. We have to investigate." Looking back, I should have stopped her right there. Should have grabbed her and run back down the mountain. But I was curious too, and curiosity has killed more than just cats. We entered the cave together, and that's when everything went wrong. The cave tunnel sloped downward for maybe 100 yards before opening into a chamber the size of a church. Our flashlights revealed walls covered in symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. But it was the thing in the center that made us both stop breathing. It looked like a machine built by someone who had never seen a machine before. Crystal formations grew through metal that shouldn't exist, all of it pulsing with soft blue light. The humming was coming from inside it, a sound that you felt in your bones. "My God," Rachel whispered. "What is it?" I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. The symbols on the walls were the same ones from my dream, but now I could see they weren't Cherokee. They weren't from anywhere on Earth. "This is what the Sky People left behind," I said, "what the Cherokee tried to seal away." Rachel was taking readings, her equipment going wild. "John, this thing is generating electromagnetic fields that shouldn't be possible, and it's responding to our presence." The blue light was getting brighter. The humming was getting louder. "We need to leave. Now." But Rachel wasn't listening. She was walking toward the machine like it was calling to her. "Can you hear that?" she asked. "It's beautiful. It's trying to tell us something." I grabbed her arm. "Rachel, we're leaving right now." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were wrong. Too bright. Like there was light burning behind them. "It's showing me things, John. Amazing things. How the brain really works. How consciousness forms. How to make people better. Rachel, we could help so many people. End mental illness. End suffering." The machine pulsed brighter, and suddenly I could hear voices. Not the Cherokee warriors. Different voices, speaking in languages that had never been heard on Earth. "Feed us," they whispered. "Give us your fear, your pain, your memories." That's when I understood. The machine wasn't trying to help anyone. It was hungry. It had been feeding on the Cherokee warriors 100 years ago, driving them insane with visions and rage until they destroyed each other. Now it was waking up again, and it wanted to feed. Rachel, that thing is what's been making people sick. It feeds on human minds. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. No, John, it wants to heal. It wants to make us whole. The light from the machine was so bright now I could barely see. The humming had become a scream that seemed to come from inside my skull. I tried to pull Rachel away, but she fought me. Really fought, with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. "You don't understand," she screamed. "It chose me. It wants me to be its voice." That's when she pulled the scalpel from her medical kit. I'd been in combat. I knew when someone was trying to kill me. Rachel came at me with surgical precision, trying to cut my throat with movements that were too fast and too coordinated. I grabbed her wrist and we fought in the blue light of that alien machine while voices that weren't human screamed in languages that hurt to hear. Finally, I managed to knock the scalpel away and pin her arms, but she kept struggling, her eyes blazing with that unnatural light. "It has to feed, John," she whispered. "If it doesn't feed, it dies. And if it dies, the knowledge dies with it." "Good," I said, and dragged her toward the tunnel. She fought me every step of the way out of that cave. By the time we reached daylight, she'd gone limp. Unconscious or exhausted, I couldn't tell. I carried her down the mountain and radioed for help. Within an hour, 3 black helicopters landed near my ranger station. Men in suits got out, not Park Service, not local police. Federal agents with badges I didn't recognize. "Ranger Hillcrest," one of them said. "We understand you've had an encounter on Blood Mountain. How did you know?" "We've been monitoring the area. There have been incidents before." They took Rachel away on a stretcher. When I asked where they were taking her, they told me it was classified. "What about the machine in the cave?" "What machine?" the agent asked, but his eyes said he knew exactly what I was talking about. That night, I watched from my cabin as more helicopters landed on Blood Mountain. Bright lights swept across the peak until dawn. When morning came, the helicopters were gone. I hiked back up to the cave. The entrance was sealed with concrete and steel. A sign warned of unstable geology and dangerous gases. But I could still hear the humming. The official story came out a week later. Gas leak on Blood Mountain had caused hallucinations in several hikers. The area was closed indefinitely for environmental cleanup. Dr. Rachel Stormwind had been transferred to a government research facility for her own safety. I was told she was recovering well, but couldn't have visitors. The federal agents visited me twice. They offered me money to forget what I'd seen. When I refused, they offered me threats. "Ranger Hillcrest," Agent Morrison said during his second visit, "there are national security implications to what happened on that mountain. People who talk about classified incidents sometimes have accidents. You can't cover up something that's killing people. We're not covering it up, we're containing it. By sealing it in a cave? That thing has been buried before. It woke up again." Morrison's smile was cold. "Technology has improved since the Cherokee tried to contain it. We have better solutions now," but I could tell he was lying. The machine was still active. I could feel it pulling at my thoughts every night, showing me visions of the cave and the symbols on the walls. The headaches started a month later, sharp pains that felt like ice picks behind my eyes. Sometimes I'd wake up with my hands cramped around a pencil, having drawn symbols I didn't recognize. Sarah noticed the changes first. "You're different, John, distant. You stare at nothing and don't answer when I talk to you." Emma was scared of me. My own daughter wouldn't be alone in a room with me. "Dad, you talk in your sleep now," she said one morning, "but it's not English." I requested a transfer to the coast, away from the mountains, away from whatever was still humming under Blood Mountain. My supervisor approved it immediately, too quickly. They wanted me gone just as much as I wanted to leave. On my last day, I drove up the mountain one more time. The concrete seal was cracking, not from weather or time, from something pushing against it from the inside. I could hear the humming clearly now, even through tons of concrete and steel, and I could hear something else, voices calling from deep underground. Rachel's voice was among them. I realized then that the machine didn't just feed on minds, it collected them. Every person it had driven insane, every consciousness it had consumed, they were all still in there, trapped in that crystal and metal nightmare, feeding it their memories and dreams. The Cherokee warriors I'd seen weren't ghosts. They were prisoners. And now, Rachel was one of them. I got back in my truck and drove away. But I could still hear them calling as I reached the bottom of the mountain. All those voices, begging for help I couldn't give. The transfer papers came through the next week. I was assigned to a coastal station in South Carolina, as far from Blood Mountain as the Park Service could send me. But distance didn't matter. The machine had touched my mind, and part of it was still there. Every night I dreamed of the cave and the symbols and the voices calling for help. Sometimes I would wake up to find I'd driven halfway back to Georgia before remembering where I was supposed to be. The agent Morrison visited me one last time before I left. "The effects will fade," he said. "Most people who have contact with the artifact recover completely within a year." "What about Dr. Stormwind?" "Dr. Stormwind was overexposed. Her situation is different." "She's dead, isn't she?" Morrison didn't answer directly. "Some things are worse than death, Ranger Hillcrest. Some things are a mercy." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to grab him by the throat and demand answers. But I was tired, and my head hurt, and all I wanted was to get away from the mountains. As I drove toward my new life, I could see Blood Mountain in my rearview mirror. Even from 20 miles away, I swear I could see lights moving around the peak. They're still up there, the machine and the voices and the federal agents trying to contain something that can't be contained. And someday, the concrete will fail completely. That was 30 years ago. I'm 74 now, living in a small house near Myrtle Beach. Sarah divorced me in 1972. Emma visits sometimes, but she brings her children, and I can see she's still a little afraid of her old man. The headaches never stopped completely. Neither did the dreams. But I learned to live with them. I learned to recognize when the machine was calling to me and how to resist the pull. Most of the time. Sometimes I still wake up drawing those symbols. Sarah's replacement wife found a notebook full of them and threw it away. She doesn't understand what they mean, and I hope she never has to. I keep track of the news from Georgia. There have been more incidents over the years. Hikers going missing near Blood Mountain. Strange lights in the sky. Government vehicles spotted in the area. The machine is still feeding. 3 years ago, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Dr. Rachel Stormwind, or what was left of her. She was standing in what looked like a laboratory wearing a white coat. But her eyes were still burning with that unnatural light, and the symbols from the cave were carved into her skin. On the back, someone had written, "She says to tell you the knowledge is wonderful." I burned the photograph, but I can't forget what I saw. Last week, Emma called to tell me about her daughter's nightmares. Little Katie is 7 years old and lives in Atlanta, 200 miles from Blood Mountain. "She keeps drawing strange pictures, Dad. Symbols that don't look like anything I've ever seen. And she says voices are calling to her from underground." "Keep her away from the mountains," I told Emma. "Whatever you do, don't let her go near the mountains." "Dad, you're scaring me. What aren't you telling me?" I wanted to explain everything. About the machine and the voices and the way alien technology can reach across generations to claim new victims. But who would believe a story like that? "Just trust me," I said. "Keep her away from the mountains." After I hung up, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset over the ocean. Salt air and seagulls and the sound of waves on sand, as far from Blood Mountain as I could get. But I can still hear the humming sometimes, when the wind is right and the night is quiet. And I know that somewhere in Georgia, federal agents are still trying to contain something that should never have been disturbed. The Cherokee were right to seal that place. They understood that some knowledge comes with a price too high to pay. But we didn't listen to their warnings. We never do. And now the machine is awake, and it's hungry, and it's calling to a new generation of victims. People like my granddaughter, who draws symbols she's never seen and hears voices that aren't there. The concrete will fail eventually. It always does. And when it happens, the thing under Blood Mountain will be ready. It's been patient for 100 years. It can wait a little longer. but not much longer. Sometimes on nights when the headaches are bad and the dreams are vivid, I think about driving back to Georgia, about finding that cave and trying to destroy the machine once and for all. But I'm old now and tired, and I know it would kill me. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe my death would feed it enough to keep it quiet for another generation. But probably not. Some hungers can never be satisfied, and some machines never stop humming. My name is Beth Ravenwood, and I've been a park ranger for 13 years. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It was October 15th, 1981, when the call came in. I was sitting in my cabin, reading through old park records like I always did on quiet nights. The phone rang so loud it made me jump. Ranger Ravenwood, this is Sheriff Murphy. We got a situation up in Virgin's Hollow. Need you up there right away. Virgin's Hollow. Even the name gave me chills. It was the deepest, darkest part of Shenandoah National Park. Most folks avoided it. The locals had stories about that place, but I never paid much attention to old mountain tales. What kind of situation? I asked, already reaching for my jacket. Found some teenage girls. Well, you just need to see this. The drive up the mountain took 40 minutes on winding dirt roads. My headlights cut through fog so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The trees seemed to press in closer with every mile, their branches scraping against my truck like fingers trying to pull me back. When I reached the hollow, 3 police cars were already there, their red and blue lights painting the woods in strange colors. Sheriff Murphy met me at the tree line. He was a big man, tough as nails, but his face was pale. They're about 50 yards in, he said, not meeting my eyes. Found them an hour ago. Hikers called it in. How many girls? 5. All around 16, 17 years old. Local kids from the valley. He paused, rubbing his jaw. Beth, I've been doing this job for 20 years. Never seen anything like this. We walked into the woods with our flashlights dancing ahead of us. The air felt wrong somehow. Too cold for October. Too quiet. Even the night bugs had stopped making noise. Then I saw them. 5 girls in white nightgowns, lying on the ground in a perfect star shape, and their feet pointed toward the center, their heads pointing out. They were breathing, but their eyes stared straight up at nothing. Completely still. Completely silent. Jesus, I whispered. Gets worse, Murphy said. Look at the ground. I shined my light down. Around each girl, the grass was dead, not brown or yellow like it should be in fall, black, burnt-looking, and the dead patches formed perfect circles, like someone had drawn them with a giant compass. Any idea how long they've been here? Parents say they went to bed around 10 last night. Found them this morning. That's 10 hours in the cold, wearing nothing but those thin gowns, should be dead from exposure. He looked at me. But their body temperature is normal. Not even shivering. I knelt beside the nearest girl. Sarah Collins. I recognized her from town. Her eyes were wide open, pupils huge and black. When I waved my hand in front of her face, she didn't blink. Have you tried moving them? Won't budge. It's like they're glued to the ground. That's when I noticed something else. In the center of where the 5 girls lay, the earth was disturbed, fresh dirt, like something had been buried there recently. Or dug up. Sheriff, I need to call in some help. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. As I stood up, a wind picked up from nowhere. It moved through the trees with a sound like voices whispering. The dead grass around the girls rustled, even though there was no breeze down at ground level. Sarah Collins blinked. Just once, slow and deliberate. Then her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Did you see that? I asked Murphy. See what? I looked back at Sarah. Her eyes had closed. She looked peaceful now, like she was just sleeping under the stars. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew this was just the beginning. The girls were taken to the county hospital, but I stayed behind to examine the site. As a ranger with a background in folklore studies, I'd investigated plenty of strange happenings in these mountains. Usually, there was a simple explanation. Usually. I set up camp lights around the area and started taking photos. Every single picture came out wrong. The film showed dark shapes that weren't there when I took the shots. Shadows that moved between frames. In one photo, there were 6 girls instead of 5. By morning, I had a theory forming. Virgin's Hollow got its name from local history. Back in 1692, when the witch trials were happening up in Salem, this area had its own panic. 7 women were accused of witchcraft and burned alive right here in this hollow. The records called them the Virgin's Hollow 7 because most were young and unmarried. I was starting to think those old stories might be more than just mountain folklore. The call from the hospital came at 6 a.m. "Ranger Ravenwood? The girls are awake. You might want to get down here." Dr. Martinez met me in the lobby. She looked like she hadn't slept. They woke up around dawn, all at the same time, started speaking in unison, same words, same tone. Then they just stopped. What did they say? That's the strange part. We recorded it, had Professor Williams from the college listen. He says it's Middle English, from the 1600s. She led me to the girls' room. All 5 were sitting up in their beds, staring at the window. They looked normal now, just tired. But when I walked in, they all turned to look at me at the exact same time. "You were there," said Sarah Collins, her voice flat and strange. "In the hollow." "Yes, I was there. How are you feeling?" "We remember everything," said another girl, Emma Price. "We remember the fire, the screaming, the men with their torches and their prayers." My skin went cold. "What fire?" The 5 girls spoke together, their voices mixing like a choir. "They burned us for healing the sick, for helping women birth their babies, for knowing which herbs could ease pain. They called us witches, and they burned us alive." Dr. Martinez grabbed my arm. "They've been saying things like this all morning, talking about events from 300 years ago like they lived through them." "We did live through them," said Sarah, her eyes never leaving mine. "We died through them too. But death is not the end in Virgin's Hollow." "What do you want?" I asked. All 5 girls smiled at the same time. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Justice," they said together. "The descendants of our murderers still live in this valley. Their blood will pay for their ancestors' crimes." That's when the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard the girls laughing. Not the happy laughter of teenagers, but something older, deeper, full of centuries of hate. When the emergency lighting came on, the beds were empty. All 5 girls were gone. The only thing left behind was the smell of smoke and the sound of someone singing an old lullaby in the walls. I ran to the window. Down in the parking lot, 5 figures in white were walking toward the woods. They moved together, in perfect step, like they were connected by invisible strings. By the time I got outside, they had vanished into the morning mist. But I knew where they were going. Back to Virgin's Hollow. Back to where it all began. I called my old professor, Dr. Cornelius Grimm, who taught folklore at the State University. If anyone would know how to handle this, it would be him. "Beth," he said when I finished explaining, "you're dealing with something very dangerous. Spirits who died violently can imprint themselves on a location. If what you're describing is real, those girls have become vessels for the executed women. How do we stop it? You might not be able to. If these spirits want revenge, they'll take it. The question is whether you want to be standing in their way when they do. But I couldn't just let this happen. Those were real girls with real families who loved them. Whatever was controlling them, I had to find a way to break it." I packed my gear and headed back to Virgin's Hollow. This time, I was going in prepared. This time, I was going in to fight. I reached Virgin's Hollow just as the sun was setting. The place felt different now, charged with energy that made my skin crawl. The air tasted of smoke and old blood. The girls were there, standing in the same star pattern where I'd found them. But they weren't lying down anymore. They were upright, swaying slightly. their arms raised toward the darkening sky. They were chanting in that old language, their voices weaving together like a spell. I stayed hidden in the trees, watching. Every few minutes, animals would emerge from the forest. Deer, rabbits, even a black bear. They would walk right up to the girls, then collapse. Dead. The girls would reach down and touch each animal, and a faint light would flow from the bodies into their hands. They were gathering power. But for what? That's when I saw the other shapes moving between the trees. 3 women in burned, tattered dresses. Their skin was charred black in places, and smoke drifted up from their hair. They circled the clearing like predators, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. The spirits of the executed witches. They were here, using the girls as anchors to the physical world. One of them looked directly at me, even though I was hidden behind thick bushes. She smiled, showing teeth black as coal. "Come out, Ranger," she called, her voice like wind through dry leaves. "You cannot hide from the dead." I had no choice. I stepped into the clearing, my hand on the iron cross Dr. Grimm had given me. Iron was supposed to protect against evil spirits. "Let the girls go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're innocent." The witch laughed. "Innocent? Like we were innocent? Like the children we delivered were innocent? Like the women we saved from dying in childbirth were innocent?" The 5 girls turned to look at me, but their eyes weren't their own anymore. They glowed, with the same red light as the spirits. "The descendants of Judge Blackwood still live in the valley," said Sarah's voice, but it wasn't Sarah speaking. "The children of Reverend Thorne preach in his church. The blood of Constable Wade flows in new veins." "They didn't kill you," I said. "Their ancestors did, 300 years ago." "Blood calls to blood," said another spirit. "Sin passes from father to son. They will pay for their father's crimes." The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Frost began forming on the grass around my feet. The girls raised their hands higher, and I could see light gathering in their palms. Red light, angry and hot. That's when the attack came. Animals poured out of the forest. Not normal animals. Their eyes glowed red like the spirits, and they moved wrong, too fast and too quiet. Wolves with mouths full of too many teeth. Ravens with wingspans like eagles. Snakes thick as my arm, moving through the air like they were swimming. I ran. Behind me I could hear the girls laughing and the witches singing. The sound followed me through the trees, getting louder instead of fainter. No matter how fast I ran, they were keeping up. A wolf landed on my back, knocking me to the ground. Its claws raked across my shoulders as I rolled away. I grabbed a fallen branch and swung it like a club, but the wolf just dissolved into smoke and reformed behind me. More animals surrounded me. I pulled out the iron cross and held it up like a shield. The creatures hissed and backed away, but they didn't leave. They formed a circle around me, waiting. That's when I heard the car engine. Dr. Grimm's old pickup truck came crashing through the underbrush, headlights blazing. The possessed animals scattered as he skidded to a stop beside me. "Get in!" he shouted. I dove into the passenger seat as claws and fangs scraped against the windows. Grimm gunned Tum, he engine, and we roared away from the hollow, leaving the supernatural army behind. "How did you find me?" I gasped. "Followed the screaming," he said grimly. "Half the valley can hear it. The spirits are getting stronger." In the distance behind us, red light erupted into the sky like a signal flare. The real battle was just beginning. Dr. Grimm's cabin was protected by more than just locks and walls. Salt lines at every door and window. Iron horseshoes nailed above each entrance. Bundles of mountain ash hanging from the rafters. "You've been preparing for this," I said. "For 30 years," he admitted. "Ever since I first researched the Virgin's Hollow burnings, I knew they'd come back eventually. Violent death leaves scars on the world, Beth. Some scars never heal." He spread old documents across his kitchen table. Court records from 1692, written in faded brown ink. "The witch trials here weren't like Salem," he explained. "Salem was hysteria, fear of the unknown. But here, something else was happening. The accused women really were practicing something. Herbal medicine, midwifery, folk healing. The judges knew they were innocent of evil, but they burned them anyway. Why? Power, control, fear that educated women might threaten their authority. His finger traced one name on the document. Judge Cornelius Blackwood was the worst. He personally ordered the executions, even when his own wife begged him to show mercy. Blackwood. One of the spirits mentioned that name. His great-great-grandson owns the bank in town, Thomas Blackwood. The witches are coming for him first. As if summoned by his words, my radio crackled to life. Sheriff Murphy's voice, tight with panic. All units, we have a situation at First National Bank. Witnesses report 5 girls in white dresses walking through solid walls. Building's on fire, but the flames are cold, whatever that means. Grim grabbed a canvas bag from his closet. Inside were things that looked like they belonged in a museum. A silver knife, candles made from white wax, a leather book bound with iron clasp. So the only way to stop them is to give them what they really want, he said. Justice. We drove through town toward the bank. The streetlights were flickering and a cold wind was blowing leaves in circles. Dogs were howling in every yard. The bank was surrounded by police cars, but the officers were just standing around looking helpless. The building was on fire, but the flames were blue-white instead of orange. They gave off no heat, just an eerie light that made everything look dead. Through the windows, we could see the 5 girls floating 3 feet off the ground. They were surrounding a man in a business suit who was cowering behind his desk. Thomas Blackwood. We have to get in there, I said. The spirits won't let us. Not unless we're invited. That's when I realized what we had to do. The judge, I said. Cornelius Blackwood. If his spirit is still around, he's the only one with the authority to stop this. Grim stared at me. You want to summon the spirit of the man who ordered their execution? He was a judge. If we can make him see that he was wrong, that his descendants shouldn't pay for his mistakes, maybe he'll call off his accusers. It was insane. But it was the only chance those girls had. We set up the ritual in the street outside the bank. Grim drew symbols in chalk while I lit the white candles. The silver knife glinted in the strange light from the cold fire. Cornelius Blackwood, Grim called out in a voice that carried despite the wind. You are called to account. You are summoned to face those you wronged. The air split open like fabric tearing. A man in Puritan dress stepped through the tear. He was tall, stern-faced, with eyes like chips of ice. Judge Blackwood. Even dead for 3 centuries, he radiated authority and cold judgment. Who dares disturb my rest? He demanded. Before I could answer, the 3 burned witches' material eyed around us. Their hatred hit like a physical force, nearly knocking me to my knees. Murderer, hissed the first witch. Child killer, snarled the second. You burn in hell for your crimes, said the third. But Blackwood stood his ground. I followed the law. I protected the community from evil. Look at them, I shouted over the supernatural wind that was building around us. Look at what your law did. For the first time, the judge really looked at the spirits he had condemned, saw the burns covering their bodies, saw the pain in their eyes, saw 300 years of unending torment. His stern expression cracked. I believed I was doing God's work. You were doing your own work, said the first witch, her voice softer now but no less angry. You feared us because we knew things you didn't. Because women came to us for help instead of to your churches. Inside the bank, the cold fire was growing brighter. Thomas Blackwood's screams echoed through the broken windows. Your descendant will pay, said the second witch. Blood for blood. No, said Judge Blackwood, and for the first time his voice shook. If payment is owed, let me pay it. I am the one who sinned. The 3 witches looked at each other. For a moment, their burned faces showed something other than hate. Surprise, maybe. Or hope. You would take his place? Asked the third witch. I would face true judgment, not the twisted justice of men, but the real justice of the divine. Light began to build around all 4 spirits. Pure white light. Nothing like the cold fire that had been burning the bank. "We forgive," said the first witch, her voice filled with wonder. "After all these years, we choose to forgive." The light exploded outward, washing over everything. When it faded, the spirits were gone, all of them. The cold fire had died, leaving the bank damaged but no longer burning. And in the street where we stood, 5 teenage girls in hospital gowns were blinking in confusion. It took 3 days to sort everything out. The girls remembered nothing after going to bed that night. JT. The official report blamed everything on a gas leak that caused hallucinations. The bank fire was written off as faulty wiring. Nobody wanted to believe the truth. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew it wasn't over, not completely. I found Dr. Grimm at his cabin a week later, packing up his research. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Montana. There are stories there about a mining accident in 1889. Sounds like another place where the dead won't rest." He handed me a leather journal. "Keep this. Document everything. Someday, people will need to know that these things really happen." I took the journal, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with it. "What about Virgin's Hollow?" "The spirits are at peace now. But the place itself is still scarred. It'll take time for the land to heal." He paused at the door of his truck. "Be careful up there, Beth. Some wounds run deeper than others." I went back to Virgin's Hollow one last time before winter set in. The dead grass had turned green again. Birds were singing in the trees. The oppressive feeling that had hung over the place was gone. But in the center of the clearing where the girls had been found, 7 small white flowers had grown. They bloomed despite the cold, despite the approaching winter. 7 flowers for 7 women who had finally found peace. I knelt and touched one of the petals. It was warm, like sunlight. "Thank you," I whispered. The wind through the trees sounded almost like voices saying goodbye. As I walked back to my truck, I made a decision. I would keep working as a ranger, protecting these mountains and the people who lived in them. But now I had another job too. I would watch for signs of the restless dead. I would document the things that science couldn't explain. Because I had learned something important in Virgin's Hollow. The past doesn't stay buried. Pain doesn't just disappear. Sometimes justice requires more than human law can provide. Sometimes it requires forgiveness, and sometimes forgiveness requires a courage that can reach across centuries. I drove away from Virgin's Hollow, but I carried its lessons with me. In my pocket, Dr. Grimm's journal waited for new stories. In my memory, the faces of 3 burned women who chose mercy over revenge would remind me that even the deepest wounds can heal. But healing takes time, and sometimes it takes a price that only the guilty can pay. The mountains kept their secrets well, but I would be watching, always watching, because someone has to stand guard between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Someone has to make sure that when the past comes calling, justice gets served. My name is Beth Ravenwood, and this is my watch. My name is Robert Thornfield, but everyone calls me Bob. I've been a park ranger in the Pocono Mountains for 20 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these ancient hills could throw at me. Black bears, timber rattlers, the occasional lost hiker. Nothing I couldn't handle. My specialty was snakes. I'd written 3 papers on venomous species in Pennsylvania. I knew every serpent in these mountains, and the biggest any of them got was maybe 6 feet. I was 45 years old that autumn of 1963, living alone in a cabin near the ranger station. My wife Sarah had passed 5 years earlier, and my daughter Emma was away at college in Pittsburgh. The solitude suited me fine, just me, the mountains, and my work. It was October when things started going wrong. The first call came from Jim Peterson's farm, about 3 miles from my station. Jim raised cattle on land his family had owned for 4 generations. He knew his animals, and he knew trouble when he saw it. "Bob, you need to get up here," his voice cracked over the radio. "Something killed 2 of my cows last night, but this ain't like anything I've seen before." I drove up in my truck expecting to find bear tracks or maybe evidence of wild dogs. What I found made my stomach turn. The cows were lying in the field, completely drained of blood. Not torn apart like a bear would do, not eaten, just empty. And the wounds, 2 massive puncture marks on each animal, spaced about 8 inches apart. The holes were as thick as my thumb. "What kind of snake does that?" Jim asked, his face pale. "None that I know of," I said, kneeling by the nearest cow. The grass around the body was flattened in a strange pattern, like something very large had coiled there. The biggest rattler in Pennsylvania couldn't make marks like these. Over the next week, 3 more farms reported the same thing. Dead livestock, drained campa, literally those same impossible puncture wounds. The local papers started running stories. People were scared. I started spending my nights in the mountains trying to find tracks, any evidence of what was doing this. On the 5th night, I found something that made my blood run cold. Caught on a low branch near one of the attack sites was a piece of shed snakeskin. I'd seen thousands of snake sheds in my career. This one was different. It was thick as leather, covered in scales the size of $50, and it was enormous. I followed the branch down to the ground, then kept following. The skin went on, stretched out along the forest floor. I paced it out with my flashlight. 30 feet long, 3 feet wide at its thickest point. My hands were shaking as I radioed back to the station. "This can't be right," I muttered. "No snake gets this big, not in Pennsylvania, not anywhere." But there it was, coiled in my evidence bag, proof of something that shouldn't exist. The next morning I sent samples to a friend at Penn State, Dr. Melissa Scalehart. She was the best herpetologist I knew. If anyone could identify this, she could. Her call came back 3 days later. "Bob, where did you get this sample?" Her voice sounded strange, excited and frightened at the same time. "Found it in the mountains. Why?" "The protein structures in this venom. They're wrong. They don't match any known snake species. And there's something else." She paused. "There are DNA markers in here that look prehistoric, like Ice Age prehistoric." "That's impossible." "I know. But the evidence doesn't lie." Dr. Scalehart arrived 2 days later with a van full of equipment. She was younger than me, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We set up a research station in my cabin. "I've been reading the local folklore," she said, spreading old papers across my kitchen table. "The Pennsylvania Dutch who settled here had legends about something they called der große Schlange, the great serpent. They said it lived in the mountains and only came out when the mountain was threatened." "Fairy tales," I said. "Maybe, but fairy tales usually start with something real." She pointed to a passage in an old journal. "This diary from 1847 describes an attack exactly like what you're seeing now, then nothing for over 100 years. That night we set up seismic equipment throughout the mountain range. If something that large was moving through the area, the ground should register it. The readings we got back made no sense. There was movement, all right, but it was coming from underground, a network of tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the mountains, all connecting to a central point deep in the oldest part of the range. Could be old mine shafts, I suggested. "These formations are natural," Melissa said, studying the data. "And something's been using them recently. We decided to track the pattern of attacks. Every incident happened during a full moon. Every victim was found within 50 miles of a specific area, a section of forest near an old rock formation the locals called Devil's Backbone. On the next full moon, we set up cameras throughout that area, motion-activated, night vision, the works. Then we waited in my truck, parked on a ridge overlooking the forest. Around midnight, my radio crackled. It was Tom Hudson, a farmer whose land bordered the forest. "Something's in my barn. Jesus Christ, Bob, you need to hear this." Over the radio came a sound I'll never forget, a low, rhythmic hissing, almost like breathing but much larger. Then Tom screamed. We got to his farm in 15 minutes. The barn door was torn off its hinges, pushed outward from inside with incredible force. Tom was on the ground outside, unconscious but alive. His legs showed 2 puncture wounds already swelling. Inside the barn, 3 cows were dead, and there, clear as day in the dirt floor, was a track, a serpentine trail as wide as a car tire, leading for us. Ram the barn to a hole in the back wall. The hole continued into the earth, disappearing into darkness. "We need to call the authorities," Melissa whispered. "And tell them what? That we have a 40-foot snake that lives underground?" Tom woke up in the hospital 3 hours later. He was delirious, mumbling about eyes, golden eyes that made him freeze in place, unable to move or scream. "It looked at me," he kept saying, "and I couldn't run. I wanted to, but my body wouldn't listen." The doctor said it was shock, but I'd seen those puncture wounds. Tom had been bitten, then released. The snake had let him live. Why? Over the next week, more people reported sightings. A massive serpent, they said, dark green and brown, moving through the forest like water. It was always at night, always during the full moon, and everyone who saw it reported the same thing. When it looked at you, you couldn't move. One hiker described it in detail to the sheriff. It had to be 40 feet long, maybe more, thick as a barrel in the middle. But the weird thing was its eyes. They looked smart, like it was thinking. The sheriff laughed it off. "Mountain fever," he said. "People seeing things in the dark." But I believed the hiker, because 2 nights later, I saw it myself. I was alone, checking one of our cameras near Devil's Backbone. Melissa was back at the cabin, analyzing venom samples. The moon was full and bright, turning the forest silver. That's when I heard it. A sound like leather sliding over stone, slow and deliberate. I froze, hand on my flashlight. Through the trees, I saw movement, something massive, dark, coiling between the trunks. I raised my binoculars with shaking hands. The serpent was real. It moved like liquid shadow, its body as thick as an oil drum, scales gleaming in the moonlight. I watched it push a full-grown oak tree aside like it was nothing, the trunk bending, under its weight. The creature was at least 40 feet long, maybe more. Its head was enormous, triangular and flat, with a ridge of horns running from its snout to its neck. Then it stopped. Its head turned, slowly, deliberately, toward me. Our eyes met. The world seemed to stop. Those eyes, golden, slit-pupiled, ancient, locked onto mine. And suddenly, I couldn't move. My muscles went rigid. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't fear that paralyzed me. It was something else. Something in those eyes that reached into my brain and flipped a switch. The serpent's head swayed slightly, side to side, studying me. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Then, impossibly, it seemed to nod. Just once. A slow, deliberate movement. And it turned away, disappearing into the forest like smoke. The paralysis broke. I fell to my knees, gasping, my whole body shaking. The whole encounter had lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. I stumbled back to my truck and drove straight to the cabin. Melissa took one look at my face and knew. "You saw it." I could only nod. That night, we reviewed footage from all our cameras. One of them, positioned near a creek, had captured something incredible. The serpent was there, clear as day, approaching the water. But then it did something no normal snake could do. It looked directly at the camera. Then it moved behind a tree, and when it emerged on the other side, its coloration had changed completely, matching the bark and shadows perfectly. We watched it shift colors 3 more times in the footage, blending seamlessly with its surroundings. "Camouflage," Melissa breathed. "Like a chameleon. But no snake species on Earth can do this." "It's not from Earth," I said. "Or at least not from this time." The attacks escalated. We found a hiker named David Chen 3 days later, wrapped in coils at the base of a cliff. He was alive, barely, but his eyes were open, tracking our movements even though he couldn't speak. The paramedics said he'd been bitten with some kind of venom they'd never seen. It paralyzed him completely, but kept his heart beating, his brain functioning. He was aware of everything happening to him, but couldn't move or communicate. "How long has he been like this?" I asked. The doctor checked his core temperature and hydration. Based on these readings, 3, maybe 4 days. 4 days. Paralyzed, aware, waiting. My God. We found the serpent's lair 2 days after that. Following David's trail backward, we discovered a cave entrance hidden behind a rockfall in the oldest part of the mountain. The opening was huge, easily 20 feet across. Melissa wanted to call in a full team. I wanted to go in immediately. We compromised. We'd do a preliminary survey, just the entrance, then call for backup. The cave system was massive. Our lights barely touched the walls. The floor showed clear evidence of the serpent's passage, smooth tracks in the dirt, scales caught on rocks. And something else. Fresh human clothing, a backpack, a shoe. Someone else is down here, Melissa said. We followed the trail deeper, our flashlights cutting through absolute darkness. The tunnel sloped downward, then opened into a chamber so large our lights couldn't find the far wall. What we found there will haunt me forever. People, dozens of them, alive. They were arranged along the walls, cocooned in some kind of thick, translucent slime that held them upright. Their eyes followed us as we entered, wide and desperate. They couldn't speak, couldn't move, but they were conscious. All of them. I recognized faces. The hiker from last month. A logger who'd been reported missing 6 weeks ago. Others I didn't know, their clothing dating back months, even years. Oh God, Melissa whispered. It's keeping them alive. The serpent's venom didn't just paralyze, it preserved. These people had been here for weeks, months, aware of everything, unable to die, unable to escape. Living food storage. That's what, and we heard it. That sliding, leather-on-stone sound, coming from deeper in the cave. Run, I said. We ran. We barely made it out. The serpent emerged from the depths as we scrambled up the slope, its massive body filling the tunnel behind us. I could feel its breath, hot and rank, on my neck as we burst into daylight. But it didn't follow us out. It stopped at the cave entrance, its golden eyes watching us from the darkness. Back at the cabin, we made our decision. We had to tell the authorities. This was beyond us now. People were dying, or worse, being kept alive in that nightmare chamber. The military needed to know. The call I made that night set off a chain reaction I couldn't have predicted. 3 days later, 2 black helicopters landed near my station. Men in dark suits emerged, followed by soldiers in tactical gear. They listened to our report with blank faces, looked at our evidence, and then thanked us politely for our cooperation. "We'll handle it from here," the lead agent said. "This is now a classified matter." "Like hell," I said. "There are people dying in that cave. We need to—" "Ranger Thornfield, you and Dr. Scalehart will cease all investigation immediately." "That's an order." They set up a base camp within hours. Helicopter gunships, tranquilizer weapons, motion sensors, the full military treatment. They were going to capture the serpent. Melissa pulled me aside that evening. "We need to stop them." "What? Why?" "Because I figured out what it is." She showed me her research. "Look at the attack pattern. It's not random. Every single victim was involved in damaging the mountain. Loggers cutting old-growth forest, miners blasting for coal, developers clearing land. The serpent isn't just hunting, it's protecting." "That's crazy." "Is it? Look at this." She pulled out ancient cave paintings she'd found in historical records. The Native Americans who lived here first drew these. A great serpent, guardian of the mountain. They said it slept for generations, only waking when the mountain was in danger. "Bob, what if it's not evil? What if that's trying to save this place?" I thought about those golden eyes, that nod like it was acknowledging me, recognizing me. "The military's going in tomorrow night," Melissa said. "If we're going to do something, it has to be now." We went back to the cave, alone, unarmed, except for our flashlights. "This is insane," I muttered as we descended into the darkness. "Probably," Melissa agreed. The chamber where we'd found the victims was empty now. The military must have rescued them. But we went deeper, following the main tunnel down into the heart of the mountain. We found the serpent in a massive cavern, coiled around what looked like an underground spring. Its scales glowed faintly in the darkness, bioluminescent patterns I hadn't noticed before. It was beautiful. It saw us. Those golden eyes fixed on us, and I felt that familiar paralysis trying to take hold. But this time, I fought it. I stepped forward. "We came to talk," I said. My voice echoed in the chamber. The serpent's head tilted. Its tongue flicked out. "You understand me, don't you?" I took another step. "You're not just an animal. You're something more." Melissa joined me. "The mountain is dying. Pollution, mining, logging. We're destroying it. That's why you woke up, isn't it? You're trying to stop us." The serpent's eyes moved between us. Then slowly it nodded. That same deliberate movement I'd seen before. "We want to help," I said. "But the military's coming. Tomorrow night. They're going to try to kill you or capture you. Either way, they'll destroy this place looking for you." The serpent's body shifted. Its head lowered, coming closer to us. Close enough that I could see my reflection in those ancient eyes. And then I heard it. A voice. Not spoken aloud, but in my head. Old, tired, sad. "I am the last. I have guarded this mountain for 5 centuries. When the first people came, they understood. I honored the balance, but you new ones, you take and never stop." "Some of us understand," Melissa said softly. "Some of us want to protect it too." "Then help me. Or all of it. This will be lost." The next night, when the military assault began, the serpent was ready. The helicopters came in low, spotlights cutting through the darkness. Tranquilizer darts filled the air. Soldiers descended on ropes surrounding the cave entrance. But the serpent was already gone. It had moved through its underground network, emerging miles away. The soldiers found empty tunnels and abandoned chambers. Over the next week, they searched the entire mountain range. They never found it. Every time they got close, the serpent vanished, using its camouflage and intimate knowledge of the tunnels to stay hidden. Melissa died on the 8th day of the search. She was with me, trying to lead the soldiers away from one of the serpent's hiding spots, when a helicopter spotted something and opened fire. The bullets weren't meant for her, but in the chaos, in the darkness, mistakes happen. I held her as she died, there in the forest she'd been trying to save. "Tell them," she whispered. "Make them understand." The military called off the search 2 weeks later. Too expensive, too dangerous. No results. They classified the entire operation, made everyone sign non-disclosure agreements, and left. But I stayed, and I made a deal. The government established a wildlife preserve covering 50 square miles of the most pristine forest in the Poconos. No logging, no mining, no development. They said it was to protect endangered species. They weren't wrong. I became the head ranger of that preserve. My official job is wildlife management. My real job is something else entirely. Once a month, I hike to a certain cave entrance. I leave supplies there, not food, but information. Maps showing where new development is planned. Reports on pollution levels. Data on the ecosystem's health. And sometimes, when the moon is full and the forest is quiet, I see golden eyes watching from the dark. Ness, a massive shadow moving between the trees, protecting what's left of the wild places. The serpent keeps its part of the bargain. No more attacks, no more deaths. As long as the mountain is protected, it stays hidden. The preserved land is thriving now. Trees growing taller, streams running cleaner, wildlife returning in numbers we haven't seen in decades. Sometimes I think about Melissa, about her theory that the serpent wasn't evil, just desperate. Maybe she was right. Maybe when you back any creature into a corner, when you threaten everything it was meant to protect, it fights back the only way it knows how. I'm 50 now, 5 years older and a lot wiser. Emma graduated from college and moved to California. She thinks I'm just a park ranger, living a quiet life in the mountains. She doesn't know about the nightmares, the memories of that chamber full of living victims, or the sound Melissa made when she took her last breath. But she also doesn't know about the incredible secret hiding beneath these ancient hills, about the guardian that has watched over this land since before America was even a dream, about the deal that keeps both the serpent and the mountains safe. Last week, a developer started making noise about building a resort just outside the preserve boundary. He filed permits, hired contractors, started clearing land. His equipment all mysteriously malfunctioned on the first day. Engines seized, tires slashed, tools vanished. The workers reported seeing a massive snake in the area. They quit on the spot. The developer gave up after 3 days. He sold the land to the state, who added it to the preserve. I approved the paperwork myself. Tonight, I'll make my monthly hike to the cave. I'll leave my reports, my maps, my warnings about threats to the mountain. And if I'm lucky, I'll see those golden eyes one more time, watching from the shadows. The serpent Nut's spine runs through these mountains, ancient and unbreakable. And as long as I'm here, as long as I keep my promise to Melissa, that spine will remain protected. Some people say the Pocono Mountains are haunted. They're not wrong, but they don't understand what kind of ghost watches over these hills. Not a spirit of the dead, but a guardian of the living. A protector that has outlasted empires and will outlast us all. I walk these forests now with a different understanding. Every tree, every stream, every stone is part of something larger, something worth protecting. The serpent taught me that. Melissa died believing it. And somewhere deep beneath my feet, in tunnels carved over centuries, the last guardian of the old world sleeps and watches and waits. The mountain is safe. For now. And that's enough. My name is Samuel Ironwood, and I've been a park ranger for 22 years. Most folks call me Sam. I've seen bears attack campers, found bodies at the bottom of cliffs, and pulled drunk kids out of caves. But nothing prepared me for what happened in the Cumberland Mountains that autumn. I was 49 then, working alone most days. My wife Jenny had been gone 3 years by that point, killed by a drunk driver who'd been drinking bootleg whiskey. Made me hate the stuff even more than I already did. Never touched a drop in my life, and after Jenny died, I made sure to bust every illegal still I could find. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. 2 hikers, college kids from Nashville, had run screaming out of the woods near Copper's Ridge. They told the local sheriff they'd been chased by burning men who smelled like alcohol and smoke. Sheriff Hawkins called me because Copper's Ridge sat right on the edge of my territory. Probably just some vagrant's campfire got out of hand, Hawkins said over the radio. But you know how these old mountains are. Lots of stories. I knew the stories. Every ranger did. The Cumberland Mountains were full of old moonshine operations from the 1920s. During Prohibition, these hills crawled with illegal stills. The government raided them hard, and a lot of people died. Old-timers still whispered about ghosts haunting the abandoned sites. But I didn't believe in ghosts. 22 years in these woods taught me that strange sounds were just wind through rocks, and moving shadows were just deer or bears. People saw what they wanted to see, especially when they were scared. I loaded my truck with extra water and my emergency kit. The drive to Copper's Ridge took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads, pine trees pressed close on both sides, their branches scratching against my windows. The air smelled like autumn leaves and something else. Something sharp and chemical. The trail where the hikers had been walking was easy to follow. Their footprints showed in the soft dirt, and I could see where they'd started running. But there were other prints, too. Boot prints that looked old-fashioned, with smooth soles instead of modern treads. They led deeper into the woods, toward a part of the mountain I rarely visited. I followed them for about a mile. The trees got thicker, and the air got colder. That chemical smell got stronger, too. It reminded me of cleaning fluid, but sweeter. I'd smelled it before, years ago, when I was training to be a ranger. It was the smell of moonshine. The trail led to a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center sat a collection of copper pots, tubes, and barrels that looked like they belonged in a museum. It was a complete moonshine operation, but everything was too clean, too perfect. Metal that should have been rusted was shiny. Wood that should have been rotted was solid. That's when I heard the voices. "Pass me that jar, Cooter." "Fire's burning too hot, boss." "Don't matter none. This batch gonna be perfect." I crouched behind a tree and looked closer. 3 men moved around the still, but something was wrong with them. They looked like old photographs come to life, black and white, slightly fuzzy around the edges. Their clothes were from the 1920s, suspenders, work shirts, and caps pulled low over their faces. The strangest thing was that they didn't notice me. They worked like they'd been doing it every day for 30 years, filling jars with clear liquid that glowed with its own light. When one of them held a jar up to check it, I could see right through his hand. I blinked hard and looked again. They were still there, still working, still talking in voices that sounded like they came from underwater. One of them walked right through a tree trunk like it wasn't there. My hands shook as I reached for my radio, but when I pressed the button, all I got was static. The needle on my compass spun in circles. Even my watch had stopped. I backed away, slowly, trying not to make any noise. A stick cracked under my foot, and all 3 men turned toward me at once. Their faces were burned and twisted, with empty holes where their eyes should have been. They opened their mouths and let out a sound like steam escaping from a kettle. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. My hands shook so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to the ranger station and sat in my office for an hour, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone was playing a prank with special effects. Maybe I'd breathed in some kind of gas that made me hallucinate. Maybe I was losing my mind. But I couldn't forget those faces, or the way they'd looked right at me. The next morning, I called the county library and asked them to pull any old records about Copper's Ridge. What I found made my blood run cold. In 1923, government agents had raided a moonshine operation in that exact spot. The moonshiners, led by a man called Copperjack Morrison, had refused to surrender. In the fight that followed, someone shot a lantern near the still. The explosion killed all 5 moonshiners instantly and started a forest fire that burned for 3 days. The newspaper article included a photograph of Copperjack Morrison. He was the man I'd seen holding up the jar. I knew I should report what I'd found, but who would believe me? Instead, I decided to go back. This time, I brought backup. Frank Millstone was 26 years old and fresh out of ranger training. He was eager to prove himself, which made him perfect for what I had in mind. I told him we were investigating reports of illegal moonshine activity. I didn't mention the ghosts. We hiked to Copper's Ridge early on Thursday morning. The chemical smell was stronger now, and I could hear the sound of bubbling liquid even before we reached the clearing. But when we got there, the still was empty and cold. "Doesn't look like anyone's been here for years," Frank said, kicking at the copper pipes. "Are you sure this is the right place?" I was about to answer when we heard the voices again. "Well, looky here. We got visitors. Don't look like revenuers to me. Don't matter. They seen too much." The ghosts materialized around us like smoke becoming solid. Copperjack stood directly in front of Frank, who was staring right through him. Frank couldn't see them at all. "Frank," I whispered, "we need to leave. Now." But Frank was fascinated by the still. He picked up one of the jars and held it up to the light. It was full of the glowing moonshine, though it had been empty a second before. "Hey, Sam, look at this. It's still warm, and it's glowing like it's got lights in it." "Put it down!" I shouted, but it was too late. Frank tipped the jar to his lips and took a long drink. The liquid went down his throat like liquid fire, lighting him up from the inside. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he started to shake. When he looked at me again, his face had changed. His eyes were older, colder, and when he smiled, I saw gold teeth that hadn't been there before. "Well, well," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. "Been a long time since I had me a body to work with." Frank, or whoever was controlling him now, straightened up and looked around the clearing like he owned it. He moved differently, with the swagger of a man who'd never backed down from a fight. Name's Copper Jack Morrison, he said, tipping an invisible hat. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Ranger Man. The other ghosts had become more solid, too. I could see them clearly now. 3 men in work clothes, all bearing the scars of the explosion that had killed them. They watched me with interest, like cats watching a mouse. Frank, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Frank, I know you're in there. You need to fight this. Copper Jack laughed with Frank's mouth. Boy ain't home right now, but don't you worry none. I'll take good care of his body. He picked up an antique pistol that materialized in his hand, an old Colt revolver from the 1920s. I'd seen one just like it in the museum. You know, Copper Jack said, checking the cylinder, we've been making shine on this mountain for 33 years now. Never had no trouble till you Rangers started sniffing around. You've been dead for 33 years, I said. The raid, the explosion. I read about it. Dead? Copper Jack spit into the dirt. Do I look dead to you? We just been waiting is all. Waiting to finish our work. One of the other ghosts, a thin man with a burned face, stepped forward. Boss, we can't let him leave. He knows too much. I know that, Cooter, Copper Jack said. Question is, what we gonna do about it? I slowly reached for my radio, but my hand passed right through it. The ghost's presence was affecting everything electronic around me. I was on my own. See, Ranger Man, Copper Jack continued, we got us a business to run. Folks in town, they pay good money for our special brew. Makes them feel things they ain't never felt before. Shows them things they ain't never seen. What kind of things? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Memories, said the third ghost, a heavy-set man with a beard. Other people's memories. Drink enough of our shine and you can live their whole life in one night. That explained the college kids' terror. They'd probably seen flashes of the moonshiners' violent deaths, felt the pain of burning alive. Problem is, Copper Jack said, we need living folks to help us distribute the product. Can't very well walk into town ourselves, looking like we do. He gestured at his burned face, and I understood. They were using living people as dealers, possessing them to sell supernatural moonshine to unsuspecting customers. How many? I asked. Oh, dozen or so regular C customers in 3 counties. They don't know what they're drinking, course. Think it's just really good Mountain Dew. Copper Jack's gold teeth gleamed. But you're going to be something special. A ranger's got access to all sorts of places we can't reach. The barrel of the antique pistol swung toward me. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drink a jar of our finest, and then you're going to help us expand our territory. I looked at Frank's face wearing Copper Jack's personality and felt sick. Somewhere inside, my young partner was trapped, probably screaming. I had to find a way to save him. What if I refuse? I asked. Then we kill you and find another ranger. They'll send someone to look for you eventually. The other ghosts moved closer, their forms becoming more solid with each step. I could feel the cold radiating from their bodies and smell the smoke that clung to their burned flesh. That's when I remembered something my grandmother used to say. She'd been a religious woman, born and raised in these mountains. Evil spirits got rules, she'd told me once. They can't just take what they want. They got to be invited in, or they got to win it fair and square. Wait, I said. You said you've been making moonshine for 33 years, but you died in 1923. Why haven't you moved on? Copper Jack's expression darkened. Ain't none of your business. But I could see I'd hit a nerve. You're stuck, aren't you? You can't leave until you finish something. We was making the perfect batch, said Cooter quietly. Shine so pure it could raise the dead. Boss says if we can make it just right, we can bring ourselves back proper. Shut up, Cooter, Copper Jack snapped. That's it, isn't it? I pressed. You think if you make perfect moonshine, you can resurrect yourselves. But it's not working, is it? 33 years, and you're still ghosts. Copper Jack's face twisted with rage. He pointed the pistol at my head, and I could see his finger tighten on the trigger. But before he could fire, I heard something that changed everything. A car, engine, coming up the mountain road. The sound of the engine made all the ghosts freeze. Copperjack's head snapped toward the trail, and for a moment, Frank's real personality flickered through. "Sam?" Frank's voice was weak and confused. "What's happening to me?" "Fight it, Frank!" I shouted. "You're stronger than they are." But Copperjack regained control quickly. "Cooter, go see who's coming. If it's more rangers, deal with them." The thin ghost nodded and faded away like smoke. I heard him moving through the trees, invisible but not silent. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam, then a man's voice calling out. "Hello? Is anyone up there? I'm looking for Ranger Ironwood." It was Sheriff Hawkins. He must have gotten worried when I didn't check in. "Perfect," Copperjack grinned. "2 for the price of 1. That's when I made my decision. I couldn't let Hawkins walk into this trap, and I couldn't let these ghosts possess any more innocent people. There was only one way to stop them. I had to destroy the still. While Copperjack was distracted by the approaching sheriff, I lunged for the main copper pot. It was full of the glowing moonshine, bubbling and steaming. If I could tip it over, maybe the whole operation would collapse. But my hands passed right through the metal. The still existed in the ghost world, not the real world. I couldn't touch it any more than Frank could see it. "Nice try, Ranger Man," Copperjack laughed. "But you can't fight what you can't touch." That gave me an idea. If the still existed in the ghost world, then maybe I needed to enter their world to destroy it. And there was only one way to do that. I grabbed the jar of moonshine that Frank had been drinking from. There was still some left in the bottom, swirling with its own cold light. "You want me to drink this?" I said. "Fine, but I'm making the choice myself." Before Copperjack could stop me, I tilted the jar to my lips and drank every drop. The moonshine hit my throat like liquid lightning. The world exploded into color and sound and memory that wasn't mine. I felt the heat of the explosion that had killed them, tasted the smoke and blood and terror. I experienced Copperjack's final moments. The government agents surrounding the still, the gunfire, the desperate decision to fight rather than surrender. But I also felt something else. Copperjack Morrison hadn't been a monster. He'd been a father, trying to make money to feed his family during the worst economic times in American history. His daughter had been sick, dying of tuberculosis, and the doctor bills were more than he could make farming. The moonshine had been his last hope. When the visions faded, I found myself standing in a world that looked like an old photograph. Everything was black and white and slightly fuzzy. I could see the ghosts clearly now, and more importantly, I could touch their still. "Well, I'll be damned," Copperjack said. "Look who's joined the party." I looked down at my hands. They were translucent, like the ghosts, but I could still feel them. I was existing in both worlds at once, alive, but temporarily ghostly. "You understand now," Copperjack said quietly. "You've seen why we do what we do." "I understand," I said. "But that doesn't make it right." I grabbed the main copper pot with both hands and threw my whole weight against it. The hot moonshine splashed across the ground, hissing and steaming. The other containers followed one by one until the entire operation was destroyed. The ghosts screamed in unison, a sound like wind through a graveyard. They rushed at me, but their forms were already fading. Without the still to anchor them to the physical world, they were losing their power. 33 years, Copperjack shouted. 33 years of Bark! "It's over, Jack," I said. "Time to let go." "My daughter," he cried. "She was going to die. I had to try." "She's been waiting for you," I said softly. "For 33 years, she's been waiting for her daddy to come home." Copperjack looked at me with Frank's eyes, and for a moment, I saw past the anger and desperation to the grief underneath. "You really think so?" "I know so." The other ghosts were already fading, their forms dissolving into morning mist. Cooter raised his hand in a final salute before disappearing completely. The bearded man just smiled and walked away into the trees, growing more transparent with each step until he was gone. Copperjack was the last to go. He looked around the clearing one final time, then back at me. "Take care of the boy," he said. "He's got a good heart." "I will." Frank's body crumpled to the ground as Copper Jack's spirit rose from it like smoke. For just a moment, I could see the ghost clearly, not burned and twisted, but as he'd been in life. A young father with calloused hands and kind eyes. Then he was gone, and the supernatural moonshine was already evaporating in the morning sun. Frank woke up 20 minutes later with the worst hangover of his life and no memory of being possessed. I helped him back to the truck, telling him he'd had a reaction to some kind of gas leak from the old still. Sheriff Hawkins met us at the bottom of the trail. He'd heard the explosion from the road, probably the sound of the supernatural still being destroyed. I filed a report about cleaning up old moonshine equipment and dangerous chemical residue. Nobody questioned it. Frank requested a transfer to a desk job in Nashville 2 weeks later. He never said why, but sometimes I caught him staring at the mountains with a haunted look in his eyes. The moonshine might have evaporated, but the memories it had shown him were permanent. I did some research after that and found out that Copper Jack Morrison's daughter had died 3 days after the raid, alone in a charity hospital. The family was buried together in a small cemetery outside town. I made sure someone put flowers on their graves. The official report listed the incident as routine cleanup of abandoned illegal equipment. But sometimes, late at night, I get calls from other rangers about strange things in the mountains. Glowing lights near old still sites. Voices in the woods speaking in outdated slang. The smell of moonshine where there shouldn't be any. I always tell them to be careful. The Prohibition era left a lot of ghosts in these hills, and not all of them are as reasonable as Copper Jack Morrison. Most nights, I sleep fine. But sometimes I dream about that clearing and wonder how many other spirits are out there, trapped by unfinished business and desperate love. How many fathers are still trying to save children who died decades ago? The mountains keep their secrets well, and some secrets I'm learning are better left buried, but I keep my radio close, just in case.